Okay.
We don't need to be. I think is this. Are we live?
Are we live?
Or do I have to go over?
Never a very professional way to open a stream.
I think we are live.
I
think.
How many people do we have viewing?
Well, we'll find. No, we're definitely live. I'm sure it says we're live.
Yeah,
Here we
we're
are.
live. Yes, yes.
Hello, everyone in chat and people watching back. We thought because we are both big Tolkien fans, and we haven't actually done anything yet on how do you describe the Rings of Power, the coming apocalypse. That we'd sort of do a roundup, because obviously there's quite a lot of stuff around on this now. We've got the trailer, we've got some of the images, and like all good modern productions, they've been pre-prepping journalists at glossy magazines like Vanity Fair with attack lines to use against disgruntled fans. So all of this and more shall be covered.
We're live, you plums. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Are we audible? Are we?
Well, we must be audible for him to tell us that we're live.
All right,
But,
all right.
So yeah, that was the agenda for this evening. Recent news breaking on Twitter has it that Joe Biden thinks that Vladimir Putin might imminently invade Ukraine. So this might, at short notice, jump from being the Lord of the Rings of Power stream to the war stream in Ukraine, or the war in Ukraine
The
stream.
actual Rings of
The
Power.
actual, I guess, yeah. Vladimir Putin probably has a ring of power, doesn't he? He has the one ring.
Yeah. Wait, what would that ring be?
Just how he's duped. I don't want to know about Vladimir Putin's ring. So yeah, we thought we'd do all of this, and if we need to jump over to Ukraine, then we will improvise. But yeah. So the Rings of Power. What do you know about this so far?
I know about as much as anyone else. My feelings are that I regret that it's happening. I love Tolkien so very much. I love The Lord of the Rings. I've read most of the books. I've read bits of the Silmarillion. I'm clued up on the lore. I liked the Peter Jackson movies, and when I first found out that curtains to stop, yeah,
Are we echoing?
Apparently we are.
Do you want to turn the gain down?
We'll turn the gain down somewhat on the microphone, see if that works. Let us know, Mr. Brown, if that's any better.
It was working earlier.
Closer. But yeah, no, I'm annoyed. I forget who it was who told me that this was going to be a thing, but as soon as I found out that Jeff Bezos, like the brief that he gave his team of producers, and along with billions of dollars, was that he wanted basically his own Game of Thrones. I thought that's not going to go well on The Lord of the Rings, because it's fundamentally different. The Game of Thrones is full of sex and tits and violence. The Lord of the Rings is full of violence, yeah, but it's written by quite a dour, socially conservative Catholic. There's not a single sex scene in The Lord of the Rings. I don't think there should be a sex scene in anything to do with The Lord of the Rings.
Apparently that rumour has been quashed now, so there were plans, rumours were going about that there would be sex scenes in The Lord of the Rings, and I think the writers, amongst some of the revelations they've given us, have decided that, they've told that there isn't going to be that kind of thing in this. So that's one of the few
because
positives.
they're making noises, aren't they, about how they do want to be respectful to the source material and to Tolkien.
Well,
but I don't see how you could be when you're hiring, black queen dwarves.
No, you can't. Well, actually, I mean, we can do that. We'll come on to the trailer later in that case, because there is a thing you say about being respectful of the law. This is from Bounding into Comics. They don't actually have the rights to the era, the books depicting the era of that they are showing. So obviously, the Lord of the Rings of Power is set on the Second Age, which ostensibly takes place over something like 3,000 years. And it's principally depicted in the Silmarillion and in the books of Lost Tales, and I think in some of the unfinished tales, but they don't have the rights to any of this. What they're operating from is 150 pages of the appendices from the Lord of the Rings trilogy and The Hobbit, I think, and that's pretty much it. So they're not actually trying to be respectful to the law. What they're trying to do is to take 150 pages of notes and turn it into a 5 series or 5 season long series. But yeah, as this is Bounding into Comics, they only have the rights to the Fellowship, the Two Towers, Return of the King, the appendices, and the Hobbit. He stated, we have the rights, so yeah, etc. They've just repeated the same thing in a quote, which is bad journalistic practice. But Bounding into Comics does editorialise on this. One wonders why in the world someone would endeavour to bring to live action the Second Age when you don't have the rights to key materials to document the Second Age, which is a good point, because this is why we've seen. So we'll come on to some of the characters that they are depicting, have depicted, and they just don't accord with anything that we know about Tolkien and any of the characters that do in fact pop up in this. So we've got Galadriel as a warlord or a leader of armies when she's never depicted as such in the books. Elrond is a politically ambitious young architect, I think. Leave the mic alone. So we should be, it's not good. Anyway, I think we can kick off with the trailer, which will require you to hit the mute button. On the mic.
just before you do, anyone listening, Mr. Brown, if you could just tell us how the sound is holding up. We've turned the gain down. If it's echoing less, then that would be good to know. But yeah, let's watch the trailer.
Yeah, do you want to hit the mute button? If you can find the mute button.
It's out there. There's wonders in this world, beyond our wandering. I can feel it.
So my initial impressions of that are that, first of all, it looks cinematographically. Is that a word?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm drunk. I don't know. Just words are coming out.
I
of
have
my
to get
mouth.
drunk to actually stomach this show.
Well, it looks like they're drunk when they made it. But no, it's cinematographically impressive. But then most things are nowadays when enough money is thrown at them. And my fear with this, and an initial fear I have of this, is that all of this lush cinematography and scenery and all the rest of it, it will be quite faithful to the scenery as described in Tolkien. It will look really beautiful, but basically all it will really function as is sort of beautiful, luscious, wide shot pans into particular scenes set in rooms, if you see what I mean. Game of Thrones did this, but they filmed on scene in a lot of places. Like, a lot of it wasn't green screen.
Valletta in Malta.
Yeah, and Northern Ireland as well. Like, Game of Thrones, they did this much better. This just looks pure evening, not
Brian.
right.
Is
Not
from
Brian?
Mr. Brown Lions. He's joining us. I don't know if Brian is still unwell. We'll be live streaming on Mr. Brown Lions tomorrow, looking at Iron Man.
Yeah.
At I think 10 o'clock or around 10 o'clock. If not, Brian has recovered from his definitely not coronavirus, then he will be joining us.
Oh, brilliant.
If not, then we won't see him, but I hope you get well soon, Brian, and thank you for joining us this evening.
Yes,
But
yes.
on the, and hello to Matt as well from Geek What, which is a really good channel. We did an interview on them, and you should definitely go. That's Geek What is the channel.
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah.
Which is really good fun and does fantastic content. I don't know if it's every day, Matt. It's a lot. Anyway, so there's always something up. We try and do the same thing. We're trying to match your productivity. So two things to check out there for people who are listening back or people listening in on the chat at the moment.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know me, I am no one. I am Ben... names. I am Lost Chords.
No, that's me. Oh, no, you're
Lost,
yeah.
you're Lost Chord. I am Lost Chords / The Little Platoon's mysterious and inferior co-host who occasionally makes a video that doesn't get anywhere near as many views as yours does. So.
You need to decide on the screen name before tomorrow as well. But
well, I can do that, yeah.
But on the production thing, so yeah, like Game of Thrones, it did it really well. Game of Thrones, obviously, it was tremendously expensive in the long run, but it was worth it. The budget I think the budget increased for Game of Thrones after every season just because of the sheer success of the thing, and so it was beautifully produced and put together. The Lord of the Rings is going to be, the Rings of Power is going to be the most expensive television show ever to have been created. It's going to be $1 billion or more. So I think it's a minimum of $1 billion is going to be assuming they actually go for the full 5-season run. We can come on
5 seasons.
5 seasons. That's what I said earlier. 5 seasons out of 150 pages of appendices.
5. It's just like, this is like writing a rebuttal of a history book based on a footnote you didn't like.
Yeah. We also have we know we're popular, and we know that the Russians aren't already invading Ukraine because there's a few Russian bots in the chat, so that's good. we can just ignore them, or I'll figure out during the course of the stream.
I'm flattered that we should have
I don't know
Russian bots.
how chat works on this thing.
Oh, just ignore them. They can't do anything.
Probably will ignore them. There's a way to block them. Anyway, so it's going to be $1 billion. And
Jeff Bezos, just by the by, he basically said, give me a Game of Thrones for Amazon. That was his pitch. And apparently he cares personally about this project because he knows the viewership and the profits and the publicity it stands to gain, because he sees how successful Game of Thrones was, and he thinks, well, if that can be done for Amazon, all the better for me.
And if it works, then of course it will be incredibly successful. But we already know that is not going to happen, because just the fact that I think this was before even the trailer came out, and you've already got the fan base split is probably a euphemism. I'm looking forward to this in a sense. I think it will be a travesty. I think it could well be sort of the Last Jedi moment. But The Last Jedi was really good for YouTubers, so we have reason to look forward to it. But yeah, so it's $1 billion at minimum. They are filming a lot on location in New Zealand. They don't have the rights to the material in the Silmarillion, so they don't have the rights to any of the story material. So for legal reasons, it's not actually part of the same universe as Peter Jackson's films, or anything else that's come as a result of those, like the games, which is shit, to be frank. But it's trying. They've said that the writers have said that they are trying to film it in a very similar style, design-wise, location-wise. So,
I actually know one of the location scouts for this. He also served as a location scout for the Lord of the Rings, the Peter Jackson movies, and The Hobbit. And he's a good friend of my dad's. He's not my friend, but I speak to him. He put me up in his house in New Zealand for a week or so a few years ago, and he's been talking to me about the sort of production nightmare that this Amazon thing has entailed, the Rings of Power, basically saying that they're really unpopular among film producers at the moment in New Zealand, because they did a dick move where they basically abandoned like a warehouse that there was a huge queue of people to use in New Zealand, and just left a whole bunch of Amazon crap in it. And they just didn't give a crap. But he emailed me because I was interested in the Rings of Power and what it might be like. And he emailed me and said, basically, if you care about Tolkien, you'll hate it. It's shit.
Matt in the chat asked if they filmed on location. Well, I know they have been, and as Oscar said, they sorry, whatever your screen name is going to be says. They've been filming a lot on location in New Zealand, which is not to preclude the extensive use of green screen. So you had something similar with The Hobbit. I don't understand why they took this approach with The Hobbit. The Lord of the Rings was exclusively on location and used practical effects wherever possible. The Hobbit comes out. The Hobbit is filmed in parts on location, but almost every single location is sort of adorned with green screen paraphernalia, and it looks abysmal. And I suspect that they'll take a very similar approach with this series. Hopefully it will look a bit less cartoonish. The images we've got, which we'll come on to some of them, they do look a little bit less, shit than The Hobbit. Obviously not that one. We're going to come on to like some of the... So obviously this stuff is on scene. This is on location stuff. This is not, I don't think, extensively green screened. And to the extent, and we saw some of it in the trailer as well, to the extent that they don't overuse the green screen, then yeah, there is actually a chance it will look impressive.
Assuming they don't overuse it.
Assuming they don't overuse it.
The problem with the green screen is that there was a short while when it was, between when it had emerged as a technology that was in regular use and before when it had clearly been overused, when The Hobbit was a very clear moment of that. There was a period where it could actually be used really artistically and inventively, and it was quite an impressive thing used, in moderation. But I think since then, it's a lot of green screen like movies that they look like cutscenes to video games constantly. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the introductions to video games, like Call of Duty. Like pick a video game. The cutscene, the graphics are such that it's indistinguishable now from a lot of green screen panoramic stuff coming in movies. And the problem with that is that it makes it difficult to distinguish films as an art form from from games or from anything else that uses CGI. It leaves films in the lurch. What are they for anymore? What artistically do they stand for? What techniques are unique to films anymore?
Yeah, I mean, there's also the other problems, which is that practical effects will you will always get the correct interaction between all elements within a shot, which is done practically. So, like a really good example I've always thought is the Battle of Hoth in Empire Strikes Back. Modern day now, it probably wouldn't have taken hundreds of extras out into, was it Norway they filmed the Battle of Hoth in, I think? Into the tundra, into the snow, the actual ice, and film on location, because it's dangerous and it's uncomfortable and people don't like it, but that looks so effective because everyone around there is literally freezing. So everyone's movements, people move a certain way when they're cold. They interact with things, they fumble more when they're cold. If you do that with a green screen instead, then the interaction just isn't the same, and the uncanny valley law sort of kicks in. You know that they're not actually there. Not only because some of the backdrop just doesn't look quite right, it's often oversaturated in colour, but mostly because the interaction and the way the light falls on people and the way they interact with objects and the way they move, it's always slightly stilted, and it just doesn't work so well. And you can see this in Revenge of the Sith, the third of the Star Wars prequels. Ewan McGregor invited, because Ewan McGregor has the last shot in that film, but he's bringing a very baby Luke to Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru on Tatooine. Originally, obviously, that was shot in the deserts of Tunisia, but George Lucas didn't bother to go back there for this last scene of Revenge of the Sith. So Ewan McGregor, I think, thought that they were going to do that, so he invited all his friends and family to this momentous final scene. And George Lucas said, sod it, we can green screen it. So the momentous final scene of what should really have been the final Star Wars film, given what came afterwards, was just Ewan McGregor in a room made of green, sitting on a green box, pretending to ride an animal. And he said this was the most anticlimactic thing I could ever have imagined. I don't know why I invited people to watch me do it. But it just doesn't look as good. But anyway, we know that they are filming on location. It's just the question is how much of the green screen do they use? But we've got some of the images and some of the story details revealed. This is IGN's report. We've got a few more. They gave interviews to Vanity Fair. We have the Vanity Fair interview coming up because that's interesting for other reasons. But we've got some of the pictures. So they've cast, if Twitter wants to work, they've cast CNN anchor Don Lemon as an elf.
That's not actually Don Lemon.
No. But it basically, I mean, I'm going to do this. Actually, look at what Don Lemon actually looks like.
What a name, eh? Don Lemon.
So Don Lemon,
he is.
This is like him slightly young. That one. Let's take this. Why is that working? Oh, because we've screwed around with the Don Lemon versus the elf in the Lord of the Rings.
His nephew.
It's just like, no, I already know, because this series is being, everyone who criticises any casting choices in this series must by definition be a racist, and so if we're comparing Don Lemon with the elf, we must be doing it because we're a racist and not just because they look exactly the same.
He's even got the ears, Don Lemon,
even got the ears.
No makeup.
So the costume design, obviously, that looks kind of good. I mean, it's one of the darker images, in fairness. There are others, though. It looks luscious, as you can see. I don't know who that is. Is that a character in it? It must be. That's a modern t-shirt, but he is wearing Archer's bracelet, so I'm assuming.
I mean, this just looks like a normal Vanity Fair fashion shoot.
It actually does. Do they have any more coming down? Yes, I mean, it looks... This I imagine is... that's filming. That's the filming set. So this is behind the scenes. So they're filming... I think at one point Galadriel is cast out onto the waters with a male. I think it's a human man, and they have to try and survive on the stormy seas. I don't recall. I'm sure we'll come to it as to whether this is them leaving Valinor. I don't imagine that it is, but anyway, the point being, it looks impressive.
That looks like a shot from James Cameron's Titanic.
And here, this person is Elrond. Now, the events in the Silmarillion and the Books of Lost Tales obviously take place over about 2,000 or 3,000 years, as we've said. In this series, it's condensing 2,000 or 3,000 years of events into the space of a few years, I believe, which means puberty has to hit elves really hard, because in a few years by the series timeline, Elrond goes from that to, if we find Hugo Weaving's Elrond. Sorry, I'm actually probably punching the microphone. I apologise if you hear noises. In a few years, he goes from relatively young thing to Elrond, as we all know and love him.
Mr. Smith.
Agent Smith himself. So, I mean, yeah.
Well, Matt thinks he's a crazy lookalike. I mean, I
think that
suppose
might have been sarcastic. I don't know. I guess facially you can kind of see it. I don't understand.
Yeah.
There's some odd hair choices in this. I mean, Don Lemon actually has a skin fade, which have we still got Don Lemon up? No, we've lost him, which is a shame. I wish CNN would do the same. He actually has a skin fade, and a lot of elves have short hair, as we see Elrond here. So they've said that they're trying to keep the production quality and the setting and the style faithful to the Peter Jackson films, even if they can't legally inhabit the same universe. But there are design choices which just, I mean, that's a modern haircut, I think. I mean,
he has the kind of face. Oh God, who was it? Peter Hitchens complained that Olivia Colman's depiction of Queen Elizabeth II in The Crown. She had a left-wing face, and that the Queen wouldn't have a left-wing face. The Queen doesn't have a left-wing face, although whether she's left-wing or not, who knows? But it seems to me that this chap here doesn't have an Elrondy face. He looks impish. He looks like an oik, as my parents would probably call him. He looks like a northern lad who's up to no good.
Well, he is.
He looks, in other words, human in the context of Middle-earth. He doesn't look like an elf.
He doesn't look particularly elfish. We've only seen him previously, I think we've only seen him previously he's young Ned Stark in Game of Thrones, which is the only other thing I think I've seen him in. So I don't. That's another of the things with this series. Obviously, the Peter Jackson films, they used a lot of new and up and coming actors and people who were effectively down on their luck. So Elijah Wood was, of course, new to the scene. Sean Astin had been around for a while as Sam Gamgee, but had never really made it. And famously, Viggo Mortensen was, I think, on the verge of quitting acting because he just couldn't get jobs, and then he was cast as Aragorn.
Yeah.
So they had a balance of these, but then of course they had established big names like Ian McKellen to play Gandalf, and you tend to find that the best cinematic productions do this blend. I mean, again, Star Wars does this. You get the original Star Wars has Alec Guinness, who is by everyone's definition an established actor, and then you ally him with Mark Hamill, who had never had, I don't think, a serious big film role before. And this mix of the age and the experience and the new and the up and coming, it just works because you've got the reliability and the gravitas of the established, and you've got the potential which they can bring out of younger actors. It's a mistake I think some of the Star Wars sequels made, is that there just isn't an equivalent to those, largely because they destroyed all of the established characters, but also because they didn't, besides those established characters, they didn't bring any really big names to take pinnacle parts in the series around which they could hinge it. From what I've seen, I mean, I don't have the casting list up, we can get it up later. I haven't seen, I don't think, a single actor cast in Rings of Power whom I actually recognise. I mean, I've seen a few, like, obviously, this alleged Elrond is in Game of Thrones briefly. So I've seen a few of them in a few other productions, but they're not big established names. I don't know a single name who you would say is a really established character that you're guaranteed to get a good performance from any of them.
Speaking of established characters, hello Andy Mouse, thank you for joining us.
Andy Mouse is always on our streams. Andy Mouse is our equivalent of, I guess, Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's an established character. Welcome back, Andy Mouse. Is it Hobbies North says he looks like a young Legolas? I can see that. Yeah, he's got a slightly more Orlando Bloomish face than I think Hugo Weaving face. So I could see that. I'm trying to recall if Legolas is alive in this age. I think he might be toward the end of it. But obviously the main cast has people like Galadriel, it's people like Elrond. Gil-galad, I think, is alive in the second age. Celebrimbor, who forges the rings. And
is Sauron a
Morgoth.
character in this?
Well, Morgoth is, because this is the fall of Numenor. I think Matt actually asked this question earlier, and I didn't see it at the time. So I think this does depict the fall of Numenor. Yeah. And Morgoth is alive. And the premise is that Galadriel, who is described variously as this tempestuous person, as wise as she is brash, or whatever the fuck. Basically, generic, strong, diverse female character. She sees a darkness coming, allegedly, and this darkness is Morgoth, and no one else is listening to her. So you will inevitably get The uppity woman is being ignored by patriarchy, and then bad things happen.
So is her "I see a darkness coming" equivalent to Game of Thrones' "Winter is coming"?
In that it takes 5 seasons to arrive. Yeah,
Yes.
it could actually could be.
It would be cool to see Morgoth and Sauron and all of that, but again, it's difficult to see how they would depict them without using CGI. I mean, certainly with Morgoth, you couldn't depict him without using CGI, because in the Silmarillion, he's described almost exclusively as a sort of quasi-spiritual being. Sauron alone takes sort of human form, as it were, as in the form of the necromancer, and you briefly see him in that role, I think, in one of the Hobbit movies.
Yes,
just for a flash.
You see him as the sort of the figure of shadow. He has the silhouette of the later Sauron, but he's not actually in physical form. And it does that weird Doctor Who thing in The Hobbit, where it does the eye of Sauron just repeatedly, you get swallowed into the pupil repeatedly. It's really trippy. Yeah, it's a fantastic thing. That's the thing. I was going to check, because there was talk, I'll check now, there was talk.
Oh, there was talk.
That they would get Howard Shore back for the soundtrack. I don't know if they did. Composer.
Vompos.
Oh, God, I'm typing at an angle, so I apologise that...
Yeah, and apparently unable to use his left hand.
I'm
Make of that what
literally
you will,
using
chat.
it now. And you're on my left, so I'm sure I can use it to twat you. The music clearly reflects how
the
it
Rings
scores.
of Power. Yeah,
confirmed composer. Okay, well that's something to look forward to.
Yeah.
Because
If he had any integrity, though, I think he would have refused the role.
maybe. Well, I mean, Howard Shore's music makes The Lord of the Rings in the way that... I mean, George Lucas said that John Williams is the secret source of Star Wars, and he's correct. You don't have Star Wars without John Williams' music. You don't have The Lord of the Rings without Howard Shore's music. And that, I think... I mean, I love John Williams. I think he's the best, not just film composer, he's probably the best composer we've produced as a civilization for decades, if not centuries. He's fantastic.
I'd dispute that, but never. Yeah, I see
Just
what
the sheer
you're
range,
coming
the
from.
variety, and the productivity, and the iconic themes, the fact that everyone remembers pretty much all of them. And Howard Shore accomplished the same thing. I would say there's a good argument to make that Howard Shore's score for Lord of the Rings is better than any of John Williams' ones. John Williams is a better composer because he does it more often, but Howard Shore does a better overall soundtrack for the main trilogy. And I mean, every theme is brilliant.
Yeah. Well,
So
I
if
watched
he's
this.
back, that's good.
I watched this fantastic video on YouTube some months back about how the initial Shire theme used in the first movie, until that scene, so dun 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 dun, on the flute or the penny whistle or whatever the fuck
I have
it
one
is.
over there, but I'm not going to get it out.
I think I know it actually. Maybe I can play it for the chat. Well, that theme is used in the first movie up until the point at which Sam nearly drowns trying to get on the boat with Frodo. After the Uruk-hai attack. And this YouTube video explained how that theme doesn't come back until one of the very last moments of the last movie, where they've just destroyed the ring and they're on the rock and the eagles are about to rescue them, but they don't know that. And then Sam says, do you remember the Shire, Mr. Frodo? And you just hear this beautiful
Strawberries and cream.
the penny whistle comes over the top again, or the flute. And so Howard Shore's achievement in this movie is just phenomenal. It's enough to bring you to tears every time.
Yeah. That's when I was a kid, when obviously these came out, when was the first came out in 2001, I think?
Something like that.
And then The Return of the King was 2003, so I was 9, I think, or 10. Only young, anyway. But I'm not into music, like listening to it. I didn't actually get into modern music for probably years after that, but I had the entire score for The Lord of the Rings and Star Wars, and I just listened to film music. Which made me really popular in school, because I had people arguing about who was better between Coldplay and someone else, and I said the lyrics to Crazy Frog make more sense than the lyrics to most Coldplay songs, and I maintained this, though I've come around to Coldplay.
Nonsense. But for me, Howard Shore's music in the Lord of the Rings, and I hope in Rings of Power, is reminiscent of England. It's in some way...
Shall I get Elgar playing in the background?
It's in some ways, again, to me, I can only speak for myself, it's a very patriotic soundtrack, and I don't mean to imply that The Lord of the Rings is nothing but sort of patriotic allegory, because it's not that. But it's certainly to do with that. I mean, this is the reason I'm not looking forward to the Rings of Power, ultimately. It was Tolkien wrote The Lord of the Rings to provide the English with their own mythology.
Mm-hmm.
He looked at the Irish and to some extent the Scots, certainly the Welsh, but particularly the Irish, and also, you know, the Icelandics and the Germanic peoples and the elsewhere in Europe. He wasn't much of a fan of the Greek myths. He was more of a he was possessed of what he liked to call northernness. He loved the northern myths, and he understood, he recognised that the English didn't really have anything analogous. There's a paucity of English mythology, and he wanted to set out and create a mythology for the English. So he wrote The Lord of the Rings, and there's, I suppose it wouldn't do to describe it as patriotism, but it's easy to see how you could get that message from it.
Yeah.
And so I'm somewhat protective over The Lord of the Rings in my own soul. It's something that really speaks to, you know, the Shire is basically the rural Birmingham, the outskirts of Birmingham, the Middle England, the Midlands, in which we currently sit.
We're not the fucking Midlands.
Well, anything north of the M25 is the north for me. But it really speaks to that. The Shire is old England. And it annoys me that, you know, this American Jeff Bezos can come along and basically attain the rights to rape some of that vision. I don't like it, you know. And also, let's look at Tolkien as a person. And he was, as I said at the beginning, a fairly socially conservative, staunch Catholic. Speaking of Galadriel, he said of Galadriel that she was explicitly modelled on something like the Virgin Mary. I mean, she was meant to channel that. Okay. In other words, not a warlord. It's difficult to picture the Virgin Mary as a warlord.
She's more Joan of Arc from the depictions of this series.
Boudica even.
Or even Boudica. So there's the line that they've used to justify turning Galadriel into essentially a leader of armies is that there's a bit in, I think it's the Silmarillion, where this is shortly before, I think, the last alliance against Sauron forms. I think this is true. I've probably botched the lore terribly, but the basics are true. And she says, the line is, she looked upon the dwarves with the eye of a commander. And the series has taken with the eye of a commander and said, therefore a commander. Which is not the point. They can't do this again because they haven't got the legal rights to use it. But all the passage either side of that shows also that it's the phrase like a commander, or with the eye of a commander. It's a simile. It's not a one-to-one depiction. She's not actually a commander. She doesn't get involved in the frontline warfare. This is led by elves like Gil-galad, for instance, and I think she's taken. It might even be his role in this. But I mean, you talked about Tolkien and the ideology that sort of underpins the creation of Middle Earth. It's very consistent Northern European mythology, and a very rooted sense of place. But this is not what the writers of this series have opted for. There is a quote from them here. Which depicts their ideology is, it felt only natural to us that an adaptation of Tolkien's work would reflect what the world, our world, actually looks like, says, is it Lindsay Haber, executive producer of the series. Tolkien is for everyone. Which gives you things like the alleged...
Weber.
I was going to say alleged female dwarf. I don't even know if the female thing is alleged, but the dwarf certainly is.
Where's Peter Dinklage when you need him?
It also gives you Lenny Henry as, not a hobbit, but as the precursor to the Hobbit.
I still can't get over the fact that Lenny fucking Henry is going to be in it. He's the hotel guy.
His last major acting role is in, like, is it, what is the hotel chain? It's Budget Hotels.
Oh God. Chat, help us out.
It's something. Anyway.
But I didn't even know he was an actor.
Well, I just
assumed
he was a comedian who couldn't get work, so he started advertising for hotels, and then is now being cast as a hobbit in this. So, and of course, you get so this is the female dwarven queen called Disa, I think it is.
Is she an actual person?
Well,
in Lord of the Rings lore?
Yes and no. So there is one, I think, female dwarf actually described by Tolkien whose name isn't Disa. His name is Dis, as opposed to Disa.
She looks like an Aztec sacrificial lamb.
Tolkien also says that that dwarf men outnumber dwarf women by about 3-1. They look, for all intents and purposes, the same. When women are never travelling abroad, the dwarves keep them very locked up and secure. When they do, they dress as men, and all dwarves, the implication being including the females, have beards from the moment they are born.
So they keep them in the kitchen where they belong.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. All dwarves have beards anyway, and that's where the line in the original, in the Peter Jackson films, is, it's the beards. This is a female, allegedly, dwarven, allegedly, queen, allegedly. Notable lack of beard, which is... we know from... Who was the person who won Eurovision? Conchita?
I was just about to mention her. Yeah, women have beards all the time now.
You can put beards on women these days. So there's no justification for not doing that. Also, the line... The original poem, which underpins... Everyone knows one ring to rule them all, but the poem from which that comes is 3 rings for the elven kings under the sky.
Oh, here he comes, his nerddom coming out
7
here.
for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone.
Sexist.
9 for mortal men doomed to die. 1 for the Dark Lord and his dark throne in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. Dwarven lords, however, are not ladies. This is a dwarven queen. So if she's involved and is given one of the rings, then they have explicitly broken not only with not even with an obscure piece of the lore for the Lord of the Rings, but with basically the foundation. That poem provides the thematic foundation for the entire ring story, the entire of the history of the thing. They've broken with that if this dwarven queen gets gets one of the 7 rings given to the dwarf lords.
So we're going to have to retcon this entire series in advance, just in the same way that we're retconning the recent Star Wars movies.
Well, I wish they would retcon the recent Star Wars movies, but they aren't going to do that. But then there's the other thing as well. So obviously we've got female dwarven queen. We have Lenny Henry as a hobbit.
We do need to talk about race at some point.
Well, we have been avoiding that so far, but that's definitely where we're leading to.
Yeah.
We'll come on to the fact that that's Galadriel. That's Galadriel leading armies.
She looks like a bloody. She looks like a. Oh God, what's that website? She looks like an OnlyFans chick.
A slightly prettier version of Brienne of Tarth.
No, because Brienne of Tarth is a 7 foot tall man-woman.
Yeah, so a slightly prettier version of Brienne of Tarth.
I tell you what she looks like. What's that thing when you dress up as Japanese anime characters?
Cosplaying.
She looks like a parody of a cosplay.
It's not exclusively anime characters, but she does look a little bit like a cosplayer. I did not know things in the Second Age of Middle-earth exploded.
Or maybe it's a forge.
Given that we know Saruman created the first actual explosives and deployed them against Helm's Deep in as late as the Two Towers, I don't know why there is an explosion.
It looks like a forge that's gone wrong. Pornhub, mate. Yeah, yeah. It does look like the introduction to a Pornhub movie.
This is going to be really interesting actually, because Pornhub releases statistics about the most searched for terms.
Pornhub releases statistics.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, no,
is that why you visit Pornhub?
This is why. I do it as a sociological enterprise. This is why you can look at
Hello, Dress.
For instance, the United States, and they actually release the most searched for terms for every state in the US.
Yeah.
But anyway, whenever a big film production comes out, you tend to see a huge spike in searches for main characters.
So depressing.
But it's going to be really weird and quite entertaining to see what this is, because when the Avengers came out, who do you think was the most searched for Avenger?
What's her name? Black Widow?
No.
No?
No.
Oh, God. But surely.
It wasn't Scarlett Johansson either. I mean, it wasn't even the actress.
Oh, fuck. The blue chick?
Nope.
Hulk?
Yes.
Really?
For a time, I think it was for about a month, the most searched for Avengers character on Pornhub was the Hulk.
Well, that's women or gay men, or both nowadays.
Who knows? I'm sure that is true. So it's going to be. I wonder. We could play a game and chat can get involved if they want. I mean, just from the people that you know of, it doesn't even have to be this series. Just any Lord of the Rings character you know. Take a bet. Who is the most likely person to appear in a Pornhub search? We can tally the results later. But though you did mention
Gollum.
Gollum. I mean, you wouldn't want to be fisted by that. That's a thing. So yeah, I think this is Morgoth or Sauron. I suspect it might be Morgoth, because Sauron is not. I mean, he's just a lieutenant.
That looks like the hand of Deontay Wilder before a heavyweight battle with Tyson Fury. In other words, it looks like the hand of a black rapper preparing for a music video.
Okay, well, since you've with that very subtle transition, we can discuss the racial element, I guess, can't we? So actually, we were having the last Mr. Brown Alliance live stream we did. I think we did cover some of the news from the Lord of the Rings, and we'll come on to some of it later because, like, obviously, Vanity Fair got the first scoop on this. It sat down with the creators. It talked to them about their ideology. It talked about their writing, what they're going to depict. I believe we'll probably see somewhere in this interview that they started prepping the media with essentially a tagline to use against fans who complain about the casting choices, accusing them of the usual racist, sexist, misogynistic, homophobic. I'm sure they'll find a way of cramming Islamophobic in there somewhere. And so I made this point on the Mr. Brown Lions live stream, which is that Game of Thrones does diverse casting really well.
Yeah.
Game of Thrones, it depicts an incredibly rich world. I was going to try and find the relevant image again, but I don't know that I still have it up. An incredibly rich world. And, people from Dorne obviously look like people from Dorne. The Dothraki are the Dothraki. People from Winterfell are pasty-faced northerners. People from House Tyrell come from a much sunnier, they're much more sort of flaneur-ish, slightly darker, sort of like Latin-esque skin tone.
Ethnic dark.
And it comports with the world in which they live. And that works. It has a really diverse cast. And it uses that to flesh out the world in which it has created. The Lord of the Rings, having taken, as we see here, the line, Tolkien is for everyone, therefore it has to depict our world as it actually looks like. They take this to mean that the Shire has to resemble the most cosmopolitan inner city borough of a major metropolitan area, which...
Yeah, the kind of place that an estate agent would describe as vibrant when you're looking for a flat.
Actually, I did
it's a very vibrant area.
Went to rent
vibrant
a flat.
is just a euphemism for shithole.
I once went to rent a flat in London when I was at uni, and there was a very posh woman in before me, and I was sort of listening to her conversation, and she was asking about what they had because the estate agent covered a large area, and she was asking about a couple of different places, and when it got to one of them in particular, the estate agent legitimately said, well, one thing to bear in mind about that area is that it is very cosmopolitan. And I just thought, my God. I mean, that wasn't even veiled. That was just, do you want to live near minorities? No, you don't you? Because I understand that. So you should probably know that that's a cosmopolitan area. So this kind of attitude legitimately does exist. I'm sure there are Tolkien fans who are genuinely racist. But most people complaining about the diverse casting in The Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, this is not the motivation. And again, I made this point in the Mr. Brown Alliance live stream. What you do, the point of the Shire is it's an incredibly reclusive and exclusive place, isn't it? It distrusts outsiders. That's the point of the Shire. It doesn't mix with the outside world. The whole mythology of the Shire and of the hobbits themselves is that they don't get involved in the dealings of the big people. So it must logically be...
They don't even like their near neighbours in Bree.
No, and their near neighbours in Bree find hobbits a curio because they just don't see them very often because they never leave the Shire.
Yeah.
It's an incredibly inclusive place. So what you need to depict that convincingly is, because this has implications for demographics. Inclusive places have very little demographic diversity at all. This is true in any country anywhere in the world. The most reclusive places on earth are mountain towns. Mountain towns are famously sort of hick places in the United States. And
I've been to mountain towns in Italy.
They
exactly
do not
the
mix.
Same.
I mean, the hills have eyes is what it is for a reason.
Yeah.
They are all inbred because mountain peoples do not mix.
Can you see?
The Shire does not mix with people. If you're going to cast Lenny Henry as a hobbit, which you shouldn't do because he's not an actor, but if you are going to do that, then to make the Shire work, you need to have all of the hobbits
opposite a blackface, white them up.
Yeah, well, you could do that. You're allowed to do that. You're not allowed to do it the way around. But if you're doing that, all the hobbits need to be black because I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with that because that makes sense in the context of the world. I think that would be done to prove a point politically, and I don't think that would be good. But within the context of the world, that makes sense. The Shire is reclusive. If there is one black hobbit, the odds are they're all going to be black. It's the same thing in the United Kingdom. We've got 3% of the UK population is black. So most casting decisions are made based on the demographics of cities and not the country as a whole. Same thing with America. Tales of Japanese tourists who go to the United States. and they wander around places, and when asked for their impressions afterward, they said, well, yeah, but from your TV, I thought there would be more black people around. I didn't realise it was only 13% of the population.
But there's a contradiction here. Sorry to interrupt.
No,
there's a contradiction here in the left-wing mindset that's pushing this nonsense. At the same time that they're asking us to be as conscious of race and racial difference as humanly possible, they're also asking us to be colourblind in instances like this. Ignore the fact that hobbits are black, even though, as you say, the Shire is an incredibly insular little society. So be colourblind in that instance. Ignore the fact that some of them are black and some of them are white and some of them might be Chinese or whatever. But outside of this series, be as conscious of race as humanly possible. And I'd also point out that the left, again, the people that are pushing this nonsense, they never recognize that inclusivity implies exclusivity. You can't be universally inclusive. I know that's what they want us to be, but you can't be. Because to be inclusive within a particular in-group implies that you're going to exclude people who don't fit within that in-group. At the very same time, however, that they're asking us to be universally exclusive, they're asking us to exclude white people from the society of the anointed, because white people are evil, fascist, racists. None of this makes any fucking sense. And the fact that they're foisting it on this, beloved literature, it's oh God, boils my blood, to use the cliche.
No, you do get that. I mean, these are the same people who will complain that Dune, for instance, doesn't feature enough actual Muslims as actors.
Oh, you did a video on that, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
Doesn't have enough space
Dune
Muslims.
needs more space Muslims.
Yeah.
Because that was one of the first videos we did, actually, on the show. The same people who will complain that any old-fashioned depiction of, say, the Arabian Nights features white actors, therefore it's cultural appropriation, do not complain about cultural appropriation when it comes to diversifying Northern European mythology like Tolkien. But you can make these political arguments. The problem, I think, is that you have to make these political arguments because it has been politicized. But ideally, you wouldn't have to. You can critique this purely from within the perspective of the law of the world. The Shire is an exclusive place. It's a reclusive place. It does not look like Chicago. Therefore, it should not look like Chicago. If you make it look like Chicago, you should also bring the attendant crime raid. We will say goodnight to Andy Mouse because he's
Detroit,
logging off.
Good night, Andy Mouse.
It just does not make any sense. Why are they doing this? Well, why are they doing this? Because, as they said, they want to depict our world as it currently is, not his world as it currently is. And this argument over the racism...
It's an ingratitude, isn't it?
So we've actually got one up here. Where is it? Here we are. The OneRing.net has been leading this attack, basically, on allegedly racist fans. The OneRing.net, once upon a time, threw up a huge hissy fit because Arwen in the Peter Jackson films had too big a role. Now, the OneRing.net is saying that if you don't think that minor characters should be inflated on the grounds of race, you're doing something wrong. And there's been no recognition of the hypocrisy. This was published yesterday, I think it was, or the day before, on the Rings of Power. So it's on the issue of race, the race question. I have not read this through yet, so we're basically going through this together.
Why is there a hyphen between first and ever?
Where are we looking at?
Top line.
What
the fuck?
First ever? Yeah.
Grammar?
With the ring, it's the OneRing.net. I'm not sure it's there.
The first ever reveal of Amazon's TV series, The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, via Vanity Fair last night ignited anew the flame of passion for discussing Tolkien's works, now being adapted for a new medium and in a new format, more so because the showrunners set out to come up with the new novel Tolkien never wrote. That's
what the showrunners said they would do. They say that they can, the problem with Tolkien is that he just wasn't imaginative enough.
The fucking ingratitude, the cheek of it.
He had some good ideas, yeah, but he couldn't really tell these stories, so we're going to do this in the way that he never could.
Oh my God.
I'm so glad that two people who've got no screen credits to their name, but were recommended by J.J. fucking Abrams, think that they could do a better job than Tolkien of depicting stories that Tolkien never wrote, allegedly. In fact, he did write these stories, it's just that they can't use them for legal reasons. Anyway, this is from... Who's this from? Earl, I'm not very familiar with the OneRing.net. Earl, I think, is one of the editors of OneRing.net. Could be wrong. Earl, if you ever discover this, you're a shit. It covers a vast period of time, spanning 1,000 years, but Tolkien, one might say, for all his numerous writings...
One might say, meaning I think.
I think without justification.
Yes.
Almost neglected this period of Arda's history in comparison to the detailed stories he wrote concerning the events and characters of the First and Third Ages of Arda. This is true. I mean, there is a big gap. The Silmarillion does a lot with the First Age, and of course the Lord of the Rings does a lot with the Third Age. It's true. A lot of the stuff about the Second Age comes from the books of Lost Tales and everything. But the point of those is to flesh out the mythology that you feature in the main trilogy of books. It's not necessary. He could have done more with them. I'm sure if he'd lived longer, he would have done more with them. But the point is that the Silmarillion will tell individually the tale of Beren and Luthien, not necessarily as a crux story in its own right, but because that's mentioned as a particularly important and poignant myth in the Fellowship of the Ring. Aragorn sees the parallels between himself and Arwen in the tale of Beren and Luthien. So Tolkien goes and fleshes out the mythology that's raised there, and it doesn't necessarily make for a contiguous story, but that was the point. But you can make a claim. You can claim nevertheless that the Second Age was neglected. I'm wondering how they get from that to therefore the Second Age was multicultural though. That's going to be an interesting thing. Bold yet befitting of this sprawling legendarium. The article continues as the title of the show, concerning which showrunners J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay says, "This is a title we imagine could live on the spine of a book next to Tolkien's other classics." I mean, yeah, I guess you could say that, but...
I mean, if they did fulfill that pitch, then all power to them. I mean, I should point out, I do want this to be good.
I would love it if it is.
I would
love it if it is.
Yeah, it would be brilliant if it was good. Amazon's ambition to embark, if you scroll up a bit, upon crafting such an original story, one that complements Tolkien's writings, stays true to the essence of his work. We'll see about that. Well, I think we've already trashed that. Yeah,
they've literally said that they won't. In the Vanity Fair article, which this article is quoting from, they say that they can't do that because they don't have the rights to it.
They're saying it will be judged critically by millions of hardcore fans, scholars, artists, and the industry itself. What do they mean by scholars?
Well, no, there are Tolkien scholars.
I know there are.
There's an interesting story there. The principal Tolkien scholar they were using, whose name escapes me for the moment, but he's one of the most renowned of the Tolkien scholars. And they actually did.
I have a degree in David Beckham studies.
No, but Tolkien studies is much more profitable. I mean, it is a study of mythology. You can't say that Tolkien set out to create a distinctively Northern European myth and dismiss Tolkien studies, and then not dismiss the studies of the Icelandic legends that he drew upon, because that was his goal, was to recreate something of the same scope. And it's a really profitable field. Anyway, they actually plugged this. They used this as a selling point. We not only are we doing Tolkien, we have a really impressive Tolkien scholar at work on our series. That Tolkien scholar was dumped about a few months ago. The reason was never given. He allegedly gave an unverified or an unapproved interview to a German magazine. That's the official excuse that was given. But in that interview, that's when he first, I think, explained that they didn't have the rights to depict things accurately. And the fact is that they claim that the presence of Tolkien scholars is a point in its favour that will add to its veracity. But they've also dumped the most important Tolkien scholar that they had, because he gave an interview saying things that they didn't like, which I don't think really speaks very well of their regard for the law that they are claiming they're upholding. Behind the corporate logo we're all familiar with, a group of passionate artists, showrunners, writers, production crew, and of course the cast, many themselves Tolkien fans, I wonder, who have been working for the past few years and will continue to do so for the better part of the decade to bring to life beloved characters and stories that so far have existed only in word. Blah, 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 blah. The weight of responsibility to both honour Tolkien and please his legions of fans, must be tremendous. And the initial wave of reactions to Vanity Fair's first reveal is telling of the enormity of the responsibility. We finally saw many of the leading cast as the characters they were chosen to portray, while most of the cast, is that Morphid?
Enormity technically means evil.
Does it?
Yeah, it's not. Enormity doesn't mean size. It means great evil.
It does in my respect. But Morphid Clark's Galadriel, Owen Arthur's Prince Durin IV. I think Disa, the Dwarven queen, is supposed to be a descendant of Durin in the official lore, anyway. Yeah, so I'm going to mispronounce the name, but Driss. I'm going to really mispronounce your name. I'm just going to call you Driss. Apologies for not risking the second one. It won't be as bad as Star Trek Discovery. Quite possibly because I think they will actually have a modicum of storytelling ability. I think that the stories will be inflected, if not overcome, by social justice-y narratives, but they won't do the unsubtlety of Star Trek Discovery, which just exists to give an episodic weekly lecture on whatever the fashionable opinion of the day happens to be. I don't think it will be as bad
I hope
as
you're
that.
right.
I hope I'm right. I mean, in a way, I hope I'm not, because it would be so hilariously bad if this were the Star Trek Discovery of the Lord of the Rings. Anyway, the One Ring .net article says that the cast was generally enthusiastically well received.
By whom?
Well,
it's not been aired yet.
Not according to the announcement
Also,
of the cast.
fucking hyphens. What are they doing? Anyway, yeah.
Yes, well, grammar isn't going to be their strong suit, but okay, it's easy to claim this generally enthusiastically well received, not linked to, no evidence given. I don't think I've seen a single person who has not said that it's generally enthusiastically well received, apart from this article. No. Anyway, the reactions, it says, to the rest of the diverse cast was rather dismaying, shocking even, and even those might be understatements. We got to see this, yes, Sophia Nomvete, I think is the pronunciation, as Dwarven Princess Disa, standing in her regal garb at the entrance of Khazad-dûm, possessing, in my personal opinion, a rather awe-inspiring bearing. Are you getting awe-inspiring bearing?
I'm getting drag queen at heaven in Soho.
Yes, actually, I know that's uncanny now you mention it. But rather than geek out over the fact we will get to see this fabled dwarven realm when it was still full of light, food, and music, what many chose to focus on was the colour of her skin.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah. Ismael Cruz Cordova's Arondir was likewise ill received for his ethnicity. That's Don Lemon, I think.
Yeah.
Skin colour and hair, because he has a skin fade haircut. Like, you need clippers to accomplish this. I had one a few weeks ago at a Turkish barber's, and then they set fire to me afterwards. It was really exciting.
Oh, and your ears. Yeah, it's great fun, isn't it?
Well, fun is one word for it.
My ears are really hairy, so I always appreciate that.
Oh, I was just perplexed.
They're full of down.
Full of down.
You can make a pillow out.
They can't actually legally do it for yours because it's a health hazard. But okay, so we've got Don Lemon.
We've got Don Lemon.
There he is. Apparently, he was criticised. This article is undermining itself. He was criticised for his ethnicity, skin colour, and hair. Okay, hair has nothing to do with any of the preceding. You could tentatively make that point if he had an afro. Then you could say, of course, there's the racial connotations to criticism of his hair. But I have a fucking skin fade haircut, and I'm not black. So it has nothing to do with it. No, well, for the purposes of the streamers don't know this. Maybe
you could identify as that. Rachel Dollarhide did.
Dolezal. Yeah, I could do a Dolezal, but I have not. But again, you get the same problem. He's a Sylvan Elf. The Sylvan Elves are again reclusive. They are again a very, very sort of... I was about to say inbreeding. That's not the word I was looking for. But the point is, again, if you're going to depict... unless he's half-elven, then that would make sense. If you mix a Sylvan Elf with a Black Numenorean, then you would logically get a mixed race elf, and that's fine. Elrond himself is called half-elven, not because he himself is actually half-elven, but his ancestors there was a mix of man and elf in them, and so they could choose the gift of death, which man has. It's actually called a gift of death, or the immortality of the elves, and he chose the immortality of the elves, and his brother chooses the gift of death that man has. There's plenty of mixing available in the Lord of the Rings and the lore. The problem isn't that you portray a diverse cast. The problem is, does this diverse cast actually accord with the lore of the world you're depicting? Or is it just done so the writers can inject their current modern political opinions onto a world which does not require them? That would be my...
I've been thinking long and hard about the role of race in modern movies and series and so on. Okay, look, if you want to cast random people like Elrond as black, go ahead. I wouldn't mind so much if it were not for the fact that in the film industry at large, we're constantly being told to pay attention to this sort of thing. If it were completely colourblind, if we just said, okay, look, from now on, we're just going to do the sensible thing and not give a rat's arse about anyone's skin color, I really wouldn't care. But I don't know where I'm going with this. It's so convoluted. There's no clear-cut opinion I can possibly have about it. You know, on the one hand, Tolkien's world is a Northern European world. It's a Northern European mythology. There weren't any black people in fucking Northern Europe in the sort of time that he's channeling. There just weren't. The Little Mermaid had this problem years ago when it cast a sort of ethnic, what's her name, the Ariel, the mermaid. So the Little Mermaid is literally a Norwegian, I think, myth. There weren't any black people in Norway in the year 400 or whatever it was.
The brilliant example of this.
But if you're going to have black people, if you're going to cast a black Bond, James Bond, if you're going to cast a black Doctor Who, whatever the fuck, fine, do so long as we just have how do you pronounce it, entente or entente or whatever. So as long we make a truce, which is okay. If you're going to cast all these black people on these different roles, I personally don't give a fuck. You give a fuck. So stop talking about it in all these other contexts, the political context.
But you also have to ensure, to make it non-political, you have to make the world accord with it. So if a Sylvan Elf is black, then most Sylvan Elves must logically be black. As this article actually reveals this itself. So it cites this description of Sylvan Elves from Tolkien himself as proof of its own point. But it's not, it's proof of ours. We've been saying the whole time these are insular groups of people, therefore they're not likely to mix. And this is borne out by Tolkien's quote. Not wicked folk. If they have a fault, it is distrust of strangers. So they don't mix with people. Though their magic was strong, even in those days they were wary. They differed from the high elves of the west. This is the bit where you could actually cite as legitimate justification. They differed from the high elves of the west and were more dangerous and less wise. For most of them, together with their scattered relations in the hills and mountains, were descended from ancient tribes that never went to fairy in the west. Cool. That's a justification. That's a justification for making all Sylvan Elves the same race as Don Lemon. Fine, I'd be okay with that. That accords with the law. But it also says they have a distrust of strangers. So they're not going to be multicultural. They will be monocultural like the Shire. That's the issue. No problem with casting Don Lemon as an elf, given that he so evidently looks like one. And Don Lemon's journalism is indistinguishable from magic. But you have to keep it contiguous, and you have to keep it continuous. So the problem is not diversity per se, the problem is just the use of diversity. Anyway, the character the article is Bronwyn, played by Nazanin Boniadi, shown below. The Elder Harfoots are the precursors to the Hobbits, incidentally. The Hobbit, played by Sir Lenny Henry. We haven't fully seen him yet.
Is he a sir?
Yeah, he is a sir. Yeah.
Lenny Henry is a sir.
For services to budget hotels.
Are you joking?
Yeah. I don't actually know what he's in service for. Comedy, I guess. Similarly received criticism for no other reason than simply being people of colour. No. Thank you for the wine. If you can't tell, we're having to drink through this because it's really painful. This is just self-evidently untrue. Have similarly received criticism for no other reason than simply being people of colour. Well, we don't need to reiterate everything we've already said. But I can tell you, and if you just go on Twitter and you just go and speak to other people making these criticisms, you'll find that they're not criticising them because they are black per se. They're criticising them on the same grounds that we are. It's just not faithful to the law. I'm all for all mixed race elves, fine, but that makes sense. I don't care about that. That's diverse casting. That's what Game of Thrones did.
Yeah, I'd like to point out for myself that if anyone out there is criticising racial casting, diverse casting, simply on the grounds of skin colour, you are a racist, my friend. Racist, yeah. you're in the wrong here.
And you're a scum and we don't like you.
Yeah, but that's not quite what we're arguing and what it would seem that many Tolkien fans are arguing.
Oh, but are they really fans or are they just irredeemable racists?
The avalanche of unveiled, blatant, shameless racism that hit our social platforms like a massive wave last week shook me. What the fuck?
Does that mean the wave shook him or he was shook last week?
I think grammar has gone out of the window.
It probably has.
Have they been hit by Storm Eunice?
Matt is joining us on the wine. Cheers, Matt.
Cheers, Matt. Yeah, I'm plastered, so yeah.
Anyway, according to the Vanity Fair article, Tolkien scholar Mariana Rios Maldonado said, obviously there was going to be a push and a backlash. And the question is, from whom?
Fascists.
Who are these people that feel so threatened or disgusted by the idea that an elf is black or Latino or Asian?
Fascists.
We're not. That's literally what we've just spent however long it has been saying. If you want to make elves Latino, fine, but they should all be. But if you say that an insular society has Latinos and Asians and black people and white people, then it is not an insular society.
The question at stake here, really, isn't it, that we've been sort of darting around? The question at stake here is, would an insular society like the Shire, or, a particular subsection of the elves, because there are different kinds of elves, would they notice things like race? Yes, they would.
Yes. Well, the hobbits evidently do.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they would mix happily with the people of Bree, but they don't.
Yeah.
So, because they... there's a quote that Tolkien... he in a letter... I don't recall the context of the letter, but the question was over apartheid, and he does ingrained in my bones, essentially. I think that might even be... It's not quite word for word, but almost. And he goes on to say, I care not whom you make black, or what colour you ascribe to any of these characters. And that's sometimes, I don't know if it is in this article, I haven't seen it yet, but that's sometimes advocated as Tolkien backing, basically, the kind of diversity approach that they've taken in this series. But these two things do not jump. You can't jump from one to the other. You can't say, I don't care whom you make black, therefore you can make anyone diverse and not have any regard for the world. We say that you can make any of these peoples, any skin colour that you like, but you have to do so in accordance with the law of the world as established and the character of the place in which they are depicted. So again, if you're having a black hobbit, all hobbits are black. That would make sense. Therefore, I would not be opposed to that. Same thing with elves. Same thing with dwarves. But if you're saying that insular societies are incredibly... Wheel of Time does this. So Wheel of Time it's a very famous, I think 12 or 13 or 14 volume series. I don't recall the name of the author, sadly, which Amazon has been doing. It was its first attempt, I think, at a kind of Game of Thrones.
I think I saw the first couple of episodes of that. Was it the cartographers? The beginning.
Cartographers?
People who make maps.
No.
No? Oh, okay. Forget that.
It's very it's high fantasy. It's very Lord of the Ringsy. You can see why they make it, because one of the most powerful organizations in that world is exclusively female, so it was a fantastic opportunity for them to do. Driss is on beer, I now see. I pray you understand. I don't understand, but it's better than bourbon.
No, he's channeling the Tolkien spirit. Tolkien,
true. No,
Tolkien
ale.
was the Inklings drunk ale.
That would be ale.
Well, ale is beer, isn't it? Define beer.
Well, that's a subject for another time. Wheel of Time, anyway. Wheel of Time does exactly the same thing. There are things to like about Wheel of Time, the Amazon TV series, but that's only because the main actor is quite attractive.
Who?
I don't remember his name.
Before you continue, Driss, what beer are you drinking? Is it Speckled Hen? I love Speckled Hen. You were saying, who's attractive?
The main. I don't remember his name.
Who's dishy?
We'll have a look. Wheel of Time.
Because I know that you find quite a few people.
Okay,
dishy.
not in that shot because he has no hair, but Joshua Stradowski in the series is quite attractive, I think.
Beer is a super-in-law. I don't know what that means.
Wheel of Time. So I don't know if you can actually find an image of him, but he's reasonably attractive.
He's reasonably dishy.
Yeah. So that's something to like about the series. The rest of it's abysmal, but they do exactly the same approach. So where were we? We were on. Have I lost it? No, there it is. Rings of Power. Wheel of Time takes the same approach. It's set originally in a very small, isolated, I think, quite mountainous place. And again, I mean, Joshua Stradowski is, I think, Polish. Then you have a mixed race English girl. You have a couple of black characters in the same village. You have, I think, a Latino actress. I could be wrong because that series is quite forgettable apart from Mr. Stradowski. The same problem arises. It's an isolated mountain community. And in the books, from what I've not read them, but what I'm led to believe is that the premise is that there is, in mythology, there is a dragon born as a man, and only he or she can defeat the great darkness. It's box standard high fantasy stuff. Only the dragon can create can defeat the great darkness that is threatening the world. And in the books, all of this village is depicted as basically the same, apart from the person who it turns out is the dragon, and their differentness is exploited for that reason. The fact that they are different from everyone around them is integral to the plot. But in the series, which goes for, it may be a village, but it's also metropolitan San Francisco, there is no difference, so you can't exploit the same thing, so it actually harms the narrative. difference is denuded of all consequence by overuse of difference. And that seems to be the approach that the writers for Rings of Power are taking. Tolkien scholar, this is a quote from the Vanity Fair article, but quoted in theonering.net, Mariana Rios Maldonado says, there's going to be a push and a backlash, etc. Question is from whom? And then the author of this piece on wargaming.net says, I wondered about this myself. Who really are these self-appointed gatekeepers? No, gatekeepers is one of those red flag words. It's a word that it's a concept that only exists in the minds of certain warped people on the left. The idea that if you say that the world should be continuous and contiguous with, and in accord with its law, you are gatekeeping, apparently. So who is it, he asks? Self-appointed gatekeepers of Tolkien's works. What conceit leads them to believe they possess this automatic authority? I mean, I don't know, reading the books, would that be authority? I think that would be authority.
Yeah, in the same way that reading the Bible is a good place to start as a Christian.
Yes, it's true. Tolkien's writings translated into numerous languages, read by people of vastly different cultures and backgrounds. Surely their imaginations of the characters and stories are informed and influenced by their background, upbringing, culture, and surroundings.
Here at TORN, I can attest with complete honesty and without bias. If you have to say it.
Methinks the lady doth protest.
Yes, that we have supported a diverse membership for over 20 years. Across our platforms, from the old IRC chat rooms and our enduring discussion forums, to Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and most recently on Discord. I wish you'd said Getter. Our volunteer staff have striven to consistently maintain respectful spaces. Oh, there's another word I hate,
but
spaces.
People of all backgrounds and affiliations can gather together to show... Was this or was this
is
not
this
the
person?
forum?
Is this a woman author?
No, I think the name was Earl, but it could be a title, I suppose. Or it could be a woman, because we're in the modern age. But
womanly prose.
I was not alive or around or on the internet at the time when this happened, but I'll take Gary from Nerdrotic as an example. He was on these forums. He distinctly recalls the furore over the expanded role given to Arwen in Peter Jackson's films. This contests that claim, or he contests its claim. It says that it's always supported a diverse membership for 20 years, across all its platforms, etc., consistently maintain respectful spaces, people of all backgrounds and affiliations can gather together to share our love of Tolkien. Okay, but this apparently was the forum which complained that a woman was given too big a role in the Peter Jackson films. So
well, she goes on to criticise the Peter Jackson movies, sort of. We've never shied away from being critical in our reviews of these films. Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit by Peter Jackson.
Yes, but the criticism at the time was the opposite tenor to the criticism now. The criticism at the time was that it broke from the law by being too nice to Arwen.
She reveals her hand here, look, in the paragraph below. But racism, bigotry and intolerance have no place in our discourse.
Oh, yes, I see.
So, okay, that's what you've really been saying all along. People who like Peter Jackson, because Peter Jackson, Peter Jackson's hobbits were white, his elves are white, his dwarves are white, blah, 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 blah. White. Yusuf Hamza Yusuf in the Scottish Parliament.
Obscure reference which Americans won't get to a Scottish National Party politician.
Type in on YouTube Yusuf Hamza Hamza Yusuf Scottish Parliament white, and you'll see what we mean. But no, he or she, whoever Earl is, has played their hand here. Anyone who disagrees, anyone who likes Peter Jackson's depiction of the source material, because Peter Jackson was, whether or not as diehard fans you like his movies, faithful to the source material.
Well, there is
he explicitly said that he did not want to include in his trilogy anything that could not be found in the source material, and he was very good at that. And the movies were, I loved them. I mean, the Charge of the Rohirrim in Return of the King is one of my all-time favourite movie scenes. And to the folks at Amazon, Earl goes on, we will of course be objectively critical of the show. So she says above, I'm definitely not biased, and then she says here, or he, we're definitely going to be objective, again, if you have to say it. But we fully support your casting choices, and we can't wait to see how this ensemble cast you've assembled will bring our beloved characters, and then some, to life. How can you say that you fully support...
Most of these are not beloved characters.
How can you say that you fully support casting choices without having seen how they perform? They're actors, after all, right? They could give a shit acting performance. Yeah, would you then support their casting choices?
They support them on grounds of race and representation.
Exactly.
But also,
it's ridiculous.
They say our beloved characters. Okay, Disa does not exist in Tolkien. Dis does, but it's a different character. Arondir, as far as I'm aware, does not exist in Tolkien. I don't think Bronwyn does. The Harfoots, I think, do, but perhaps not in the way that they're depicted.
Or is it Harfoot?
They can't be beloved characters if the series has invented them and it hasn't aired yet. Just by definition, that cannot be true. You're supporting them on grounds of race politics. That's the reason you're doing it. And it's not good.
When diehard fans refer to beloved characters, what they really mean to say is Samwise Gamgee and Gandalf. I mean, Frodo's a little shit. Samwise Gamgee and Gandalf, they're the most beloved characters. Boromir, to some extent. Faramir gets a good look in. Aragorn, my favourite character, because I'm a fucking unreconstituted monarchist. These are people's beloved characters. They're the only ones they care about. The First Age, which this series doesn't cover, there's some beloved characters in there. Most general, as opposed to diehard fans of Tolkien, haven't read. I have not read, to be perfectly honest. Tolkien. What was Tolkien's book? The other one, the Fall of Gondolin, and the other one, the two characters.
There's the books of Lost Tale, well, Beren and Luthien. But they feature in the Silmarillion.
Yeah, most people haven't read those, except if you're really diehard fans.
I have.
You have. Coincidentally, I when I was in secondary school studying A-level literature, there was a chap in my class called Dan who read the complete Tolkien corpus from start to finish every year. Starting in like July, he started with the Silmarillion.
My dad reads them.
Tales of Luthien, Lord of the Rings,
Christopher Lee,
The Hobbit.
Christopher Lee read them 6 times a year, I think.
6 times a year?
I think it was 6 times a year he read them.
Now,
but he's also the only member of the original cast. He actually met Tolkien.
Oh, he did, yeah.
And Tolkien gave him permission to play Gandalf. It's just when the films came around, he was too old to do it.
I hope
but
that
he's so perfect as Saruman.
Oh, it's brilliant. I hope that no really die-hard fans of Tolkien are listening to this, because they probably won't like me after what I'm about to say, but the thought of reading The Lord of the Rings 6 times a year fills me with dread, because I don't know, as much as I love it, I'm something of an aesthete. I mean, I read literature because I admire the prose first and foremost, and I don't think Tolkien was a consummate prose stylist.
No.
I mean, how many times can you read descriptions about the landscape? You know, and they went over the hills, and then there were some mountains, and there was a river, and in the very next page, and then there was another river and some more mountains.
He's a world builder before he is a storyteller, I think.
He was he loved his topography. He's just describing the thing he saw in his head. You know what I mean? I can't deal with that. But for anyone listening, by the way, the anti-Tolkien, and he published this at the same time as the Lord of the Rings was published, you should read Gormenghast. That's Gormenghast. Gormenghast, Mervyn Peake. Read that. Plug finished.
Okay. So just Sloth in the chat says, I have a funny feeling that this is going to be a woke film of the sort, not like, hang on a minute, I just remembered that I set this up so we can show comments in chat.
Go on,
we actually took time to do this. Chat.
No,
chat.
that one, not that one.
Not chat, no. That one.
Yeah.
That hasn't worked. Chat, hello.
There you go. Hello, chat.
You're now on screen, chat. Well, welcome. This was supposed to happen from the beginning, and I forgot that I could do it.
Who does Sloth agree with? Do you agree with me, Sloth? Agree with me. Don't agree with...
He says, I have a funny feeling that this is going to be a woke film or series of a sort. Not unlike woke Star Wars, I have to say it. I'm scared.
I'm scared.
Yeah, so am I think. I'm also looking forward to it because it will be good for YouTubers. That's a cynical way to say it, but it will be good for us if it's shared, because I don't like it. Look at the number of big YouTubers who made a career off the back of The Last Jedi, and who I really enjoy. People like Mauler. Mauler is fantastic. And Critical Drinker as well has made a career off of largely criticising films which are awful. If I had a choice of getting famous off the back of The Last Jedi, or having not having The Last Jedi and not being famous, I would not have The Last Jedi. Yeah. Because in a sense, okay, yeah, sure, it's good for us to be able to criticize these things, but I don't want to have to be in a position where I need to criticize them. So if I could trade fame or Star Wars: The Last Jedi, given what Star Wars means to people, I would ditch The Last Jedi and just be unknown by everyone, because I wouldn't have to criticize it, and that would be so much better for the culture. That's the argument.
Well, it's all right. We've only got about 620 subscribers. You are unknown to everyone.
2 months ago we had about 100. And then, Deslath also points out that the reshoots will happen. That's a possibility. Also, the fact that they've already greenlit 5 seasons, and the announcement of season 1 has gained this reaction. So whether or not they will in fact be willing to pay more than $1 billion for the remaining 4 series if this series bombs, I genuinely
Where's
don't
all
know.
that money gone into, though? I mean, the CGI. I mean, presumably,
it looks impressive. There's actually one here.
Presumably, CGI has gotten cheaper over the years.
They can do more with it. That looks impressive. I would say. Well, it's not on screen. Where's my mouse? Sorry, dual monitors. There it is. This looks. That's the wrong one. This looks impressive, I would contend. So they've spent the money well on fantastic production, but the point is production is not sufficient to sustain a story. That's the point. Chat is back. Matt asks why you make up characters just for the show when there's hundreds of characters to choose from. Well, I think at the beginning the problem is that they don't have the rights to any of these characters. That's the problem. The issue is that all of the events they're depicting take place in the Silmarillion, the Books of Lost Tales, the Unfinished Tales, but they don't have the legal rights to use these things.
I almost wish they'd been given them.
If they'd been given them, this series would have been justified.
Yeah.
But it's not just... If you haven't got the rights to tell the story, you shouldn't be telling the story. Yeah. That's just exploitation. They are spinning a 5-season series out of 150 pages of appendices. That's it. It's just unjustified. There is no reason to tell this story, but that's where we are. I'm going to bring chat on one more time. For Novus Tullis, is it? It's a good thing they haven't made any Star Trek since 2005. I'd rather have no new Star Trek instead of bad Trek. Yeah, I mean, you could argue that there's been no new Star Trek since 2005. But I think, the Last Jedi argument is the one you're putting. It would be better not to have Discovery and just let Star Trek die so we all remember it properly, rather than have this new abysmal crap that's just thrown onto our screens in its place.
I'm not the first to say this. I know I'm not. But this speaks to a larger malaise in the film industry, because we wouldn't need to do this. We wouldn't need to make new Star Trek, and Star Wars movies and series. We wouldn't need to make Rings of Power if we had, novelists coming up with fucking original novels and movie producers coming up with original ideas, commissioning original things. There's no originality anymore. Everything is a sequel. Everything is a prequel.
It's true, but
boring.
Film is necessarily, I think, a second order medium. So film always will launch off of original material, which is in print first, and I don't think that's a bad thing. It's not derivative to want to depict aspects of Tolkien that have not yet been depicted on screen. That's not derivative. That's putting a new story into a new medium, or an old story into a new medium. That's
not true. What you just said. The film will always be derivative. Film is often...
No, I'm not saying it's always derivative. I think for the most part it is a derivative medium. So
I don't think so.
Most good films come from novels first.
No, absolutely not. The golden age of cinema was so original. Film at its best is so original.
No, I would agree with that. But what I'm saying is that it's not derivative to say we've not done the Silmarillion on film, therefore we're going to do that. It's an old story, but it's a new medium for that story. I don't think that's derivative. The problem is that they are not depicting the Silmarillion on film. They are doing something derivative. They are just taking, we know the names of characters in the books we are allowed to use, so we're just going to make up a story that depicts them. If Peter Jackson, instead of doing The Hobbit, which was abysmal, had been given a trilogy for the Silmarillion, that would have been... Just imagine. Yeah. And if he'd made it in the same way as he made the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, just imagine how good that would have been.
Yeah.
But instead we get this, which is just utter shit. And then fans are told, this is from Den of Geek, another relatively large website in this field. You get... all of these websites, incidentally, I mean, I'm a journalist in real life, so I know something about how these kinds of things work. These are all being pre-prepped with answers from Amazon itself. They are running articles, not necessarily because they are paid to run those articles, but it will benefit them immensely to do so. They are being pre-prepped with attack lines against disgruntled fans before the first minute of footage has been released. And then we're getting articles like this. The problem isn't that the writers are doing bad things. It's the fans who have to change. What's Bertolt Brecht's famous thing? Can we not dissolve the electorate and elect another? That's the argument. Den of Geek says that fans have to embrace change. Intransigent and reactionary fandom is nothing new.
Change is awful.
Not all change is awful, but a lot of it is. Change is not good in its own right. Change has to be justified.
Yeah.
Reactionary fandom is nothing new. Some responses to the Lord of the Rings Rings of Power trailer show how damaged the culture has become. By Andrew Blair and Den of Geek.
Anyone with a second name Blair does not have my blessing.
Yeah. But it's the same thing. It almost seems like it's scripted, doesn't it? Based on the trailer, there's been a negative reaction on the fact that not everyone in the series is a white man. No? Galadriel was never going to be a white man.
Was she never going to be a man, let alone white?
No one complained that Galadriel in Peter Jackson's films was not a white man. I would have complained if she were a white man. Because Galadriel is a woman. Do these people think before they put their fingers, the stubby, fat, greasy fingers to their keyboards?
How ironic that they've quoted this particular quote from Tolkien. Evil is not able to create anything new. It can only distort and destroy what has been invented or made by the forces of good.
That's because this is the line that's being used by disgruntled fans. So under the YouTube video, for instance, for the trailer, and wherever the video is posted, fans who are not happy with the way this has gone are posting this quote.
They should be, yeah. It's a
fantastic quote, yeah.
A profoundly Christian quote too, because the Christian conception of evil is that it's essentially it's not a substance. It's an absence. It's a vacuum, which is pretty much Sauron, right? Sauron. The whole point about his the eye at the top of Barad-dûr is that there's this there's this blackness, there's a blankness behind it. Sauron is an absence. He sucks things from people. He sucks the life force out of
he does.
Bilbo and Frodo. Don't euphemize me. Anyway.
But it's and it's just there is no thought going into this criticism. The Rings of Power is an adaptation of the written word into a visual medium made in the third decade of the 21st century. Is a statement of fact. Nobody needs to be told this. It is not going to match the books written in the middle of the 20th century in the same way as Peter Jackson's films do not match the books. No. Peter Jackson's films do not match the books one for one. This is true. But this overlooks the point. Peter Jackson himself said, we set out not to impose our own politics, our own values, our own opinions on Tolkien. What we wanted to do was as faithful an adaptation as we could possibly do on film of Tolkien's works. That is not what this series is doing. To say that there are discrepancies in Peter Jackson's film is not to say that those are discrepancies in the same way as discrepancies in this film.
Yeah.
Peter Jackson depicts the Shire accurately.
Yeah.
This film does not. Peter Jackson depicts Galadriel accurately, and the dwarves accurately. This series does not, will not.
She goes on, 20 years ago there was a similar backlash, including from a teenage me. Oh, God, how insufferable you must have been. Still are, in fact. When Jackson's films made Arwen a more prominent role, a more prominent character than in the books. Looking back, I realised my objections were based on ignorance. Sorry, I can't stop laughing.
Unexamined sexism and
entitlement.
But this is true. This is the point. This backlash from teenage him.
This is the kind of person who reads Oliver Twist and complains purely and only and merely about the fucking anti-Semitism in the depiction of Fagin. Read the book, you stupid bitch.
This is OneRing.net. That's where this backlash arose. This is the point. Remember the article we read earlier when it said it's always been a home for diverse opinion, it's always been a home for people who are unrepresented? This backlash, which is cited in Den of Geek, which is not an unrelated medium, is disproof of the claim made by OneRing.net, because that's where so much of this backlash took place, including by people who have now realised that it's profitable to them to be woke. It's just, it's so dishonest.
She talks here in the next paragraph about the positives that come with fandom don't counteract its negative sides, ignoring the increasingly destructive elements within a kind of toxic positivity, whatever the fuck that means.
Toxic positivity?
Amounts to a suspension of critical engagement and an unwillingness to process difficult truths.
That is literally a meaningless sentence. Go ahead.
Just the left love to patronise people who disagree with them. They say, educate yourself. Don't they? You need to go away and learn.
Or wake up.
Wake up. Yeah, hence woke. It just pisses me off to no end. You're the ignorant one. You need to go away and process difficult truths. Fuck you.
The only reason you can possibly disagree is because of an unexamined sexism and racism. No.
Jesus Christ.
No. Look, again, the logic of my argument compels me to say that you could have an all-black Shire, and that would be true, because it's true to the Shire. That you can make a meta-argument and say, does that actually comport with the fact that it's created as a Northern European myth? That would be a meta-argument. That would be an interesting discussion to have. But within the continuity of the world being depicted, no.
I'd like to get 3 cheers for dressed vampires.
Sorry,
says these people weren't bullied. Presumably, you mean these people weren't bullied enough in school.
I wish they would have been bullied more in school. That would be good. I can't, dual screens. I can't do the mouse. I'll bring chat up again later. Sorry, chat.
What's this image then? Is this looks like? Oh, okay,
well,
yeah.
So
This is
this is
Don Lemon's. This is Don Lemon's suit here. Did you know what this reminds me of? This background here. It's very beautiful, obviously.
Yes.
The carving here reminds me of the Green Man, the Green Man trope in English mythology, which of course comes from Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. I've been to a good pub called the Green Man.
I live on a boat in real life, and before I bought my current one, we were looking at one called the Green Man.
Yeah.
And I didn't know about Sir Gawain and the Green Knight beforehand.
Worth a read.
Inside this boat, there was a beautiful carving of the Green Man, and I said, "Is that Treebeard?" Because it really looked like Treebeard.
Well, Tolkien's done his job then, hasn't he? He's provided you with the mythology.
Between the broader Northern European mythology and the depictions that Tolkien sets out.
Yeah.
It's inextricably linked. So
coincidentally, they've just done a remake of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight with that chap who played Pip in the remake of Great Expectations they did. Again, everything's a remake, but apparently that was pretty good, and that had diverse casting. But that's by the by.
No, in fact, I found my mouse. Chat brings up because there's a good point here made by Herman Spearman. If that's the wrong one.
Herman Spearman. Are you German, Herman Spearman?
Possibly. He says, are there no African myths that can be exploited and made to $1 million franchises? Well,
Wakanda.
That's the good point, isn't it? And I think that's what he has in mind. This is a really interesting point. So in the first place, you have Wakanda isn't an African myth. Wakanda is Hollywood's idea of an African myth. It's so deeply insulting to African people. The Black Panther 2 will be coming up this year. We'll be doing at least one video on this, and one of these videos I have in mind is to explore this myth of Wakanda and the way in which it pretends to be really sort of emboldening of African mythology, but is in fact cheapening everything. It's so deeply patronizing. But the broader point is that, there are African myths that can be and have been exploited to make $1 million franchises. Aladdin is a North African myth. The Arabian Nights is a North African myth. Romeo and Juliet.
Well, no, the Arabian Nights wouldn't be in North Africa.
Saudi Arabia is North Africa.
No, it isn't.
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia is not in Africa.
No, North Africa. Saudi Arabia is like Egypt is North Africa, and Saudi Arabia is basically next door. Pretty sure Saudi Arabia
is not in Africa.
I'm pretty sure Saudi Arabia is North Africa.
Do you want to look at a fucking map?
I'm pretty sure it is.
It's not.
All of the Barbary states are all North Africa. Libya is Africa. Tunisia
Saudi
is
Arabia
Africa.
is not in Africa.
No, it might.
It's literally separated.
It might. No, it's not separated.
Well,
it's on a contiguous border with
it's
Egypt.
Not.
It might be West Asia technically. That could be true because I think Israel is technically in Asia, but Israel is, of course, it's so close to. In North Africa ends. Israel is about 2 miles north of the border of North Africa.
Arabs aren't Africans, hence the appellation Arabs.
Most Arabs who have ever existed are from North Africa. You're describing an ethnic group, not a geographic location.
Oh,
most Arabs in the world are North African.
ethnic. Okay, yeah, ethnic description, sure, but Arabia is not in Africa. It's not.
We can argue that point otherwise.
Arabia it's just not.
Yeah,
it's not Lawrence of North Africa. It's Lawrence of Arabia.
But it's not Lawrence of Egypt. Egypt is North Africa.
Get a world map up.
No, we'll do this later. We'll settle this after the stream.
The chat can settle it.
The chat can settle it. But where even were we with this?
He's got Fletcher's... Okay, he's just joined and he's got to leave again. Thank you, Fletcher.
Well, you watch later. By all means do.
Please do. Yeah.
Anyway, moving on from geographic disputes. I don't remember where we got this. Oh no, North African myths, that was the point.
Yeah, sorry.
Disney has done so many myths based on... Romeo and Juliet, believably, was inspired by an African tale.
Really?
Yeah, it's also an Afghan folk tale. Afghanistan is also, I think, in North Africa. It might be West Asia, but I think it's also in North Africa. One of the two. The point is...
Afghanistan is not in Africa.
No, fucking North Africa, man. That's the point. It might be West Asia. I think it might, in fact, be West Asia.
Not in North Africa.
Might be West Asia. But nevertheless, the point is, there are many... Okay, you can swap African myths for places 5 miles north of North Africa, like Saudi Arabia. And, like,
When was the last time you looked at a map?
It really is. Look, you've got North Africa. It's a straight-ish coastline. Libya, you've got Tunisia. It goes to Egypt. Egypt is on the corner of the Mediterranean. It arcs upwards, where you've got Syria, what used to be Jordan, and then Israel. Syria is North Africa. Syria has a border with, I think, Iraq.
No,
Syria which has a border
is
with
not in Africa. What the fuck are you talking
about?
about?
Then I'm 5 miles off.
5 miles, hundreds of miles away.
Drist asked, "Are we vaping?" Yes. Sorry.
Yes.
The point being, whether it's North Africa or West Asia, there are many myths of other parts of the world which we have objectively gone and, I mean, the left might argue exploited. We've certainly used those, depicted those on film, and portrayed them in Western ways. This is the whole left's argument against cultural colonialism and cultural imperialism, is the idea that companies like Disney will go and they will take the myths of other cultures and they will present them as white people myths. I don't think that that's necessarily true. Robert Toth in chat clarifies it is West Asia, so that fair enough. I accept the point. It's about a few miles away from North Africa. Nevertheless, fine, it's West Asia. The point is we've used the Arabian Nights, and Disney's presented Arabian Nights. The left would argue as a kind of a Western thing. I don't think that they have. Aladdin is not a Western person. Nevertheless, Western companies have exploited these things. The left doesn't like this. The left thinks that it is cultural imperialism, cultural colonialism, when we do it to other peoples. This was a criticism of Dune. Frank Herbert, who wrote Dune, he spent a huge amount of time living in deserts, and he thought Islam was fascinating. He didn't necessarily agree with it, but he was obsessed with. He found Islam a beautiful, which it is in some respects, a beautiful religion with a rich mythology. He sought to take that rich mythology and to put that on into a new medium. This is the great thing that sci-fi does. Sci-fi extrapolates localized myths and makes them something grand. It tells them as part of a human narrative, not as a localized cultural narrative. The left hates this when we do it to African myths. It does not hate it when you then go and diversify Northern European mythology. There's no complaint when Snow White, as is happening at the moment, is being recast as an Hispanic person. And Snow White, Peter Dinklage has complained about its depiction of dwarves because he hasn't read the book. But one of the really interesting things about this, it actually, because of the casting choices, it reveals a really interesting hypocrisy. Because the left will back the inclusion of an Hispanic woman as Snow White herself. The White Queen in Snow White is portrayed by Gal Gadot. The left hated that Gal Gadot played Cleopatra.
Because she was Israeli.
Yeah. Because they thought that Cleopatra should be Arab, despite the fact that Cleopatra was a Macedonian, because Arabs literally did not exist at the time Cleopatra was alive. But the interesting thing is the juxtaposition. The complaints about a white woman playing a Macedonian ruler of Egypt versus the acceptance and championing of an Hispanic woman playing a Northern European mythological female. That there's a huge juxtaposition and hypocrisy there, which is never explored. It's one of the many ways. This is why, again, you have all of these complaints about the West going and doing exactly the same thing to Arabian myths, to African myths. I'm now separating the two to West Asian myths.
Glad.
Huge complaints about that, but no equivalent complaints when the same thing is done to Northern European myths like the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Instead, as Den of Geek says, the fans have to change. The fans are the problem.
So much for Eurocentrism.
Well, exactly. Fans' sense of identity being tied up in something make-believe, is making criticism of their favourite stories a criticism of them as people. No, this is not necessarily true. The criticism of them as people comes if you say that it is implicitly a criticism of you as people. If you say that the problem with a production is that there are too many white people there, that is implicitly a criticism of you as people. But most importantly, the criticism is of you as people because you imbue a lot of your character into the characters you know in fiction, the depictions of characters you know in fiction. It's not a criticism of you that you're taking personally. It's something you care very deeply about, which is being traduced in the name of distinctively modern politics. That's the issue.
And they go on to say here that, for example, despite Tolkien's vehement anti-racism, which is nice to see them concede, at least, there are issues with his mythology, his equating the dwarves with Jews, including linguistically, was intended positively as a representation of dispossessed people, but he also described their tremendous love of the artifact in a 1965 BBC interview, which is a common anti-Semitic trope. So who's read that into that? The author of this article.
But briefly, Z3PO has joined us in the chat.
Tolkien, Rowling has suffered this recently, hasn't she?
Yes, massively
with
so.
The
argument that the goblins in Harry Potter are Jews.
Yeah.
Z3PO has joined us in the chat. I think Z will be with us tomorrow on Mr. Brown Alliance's live stream.
Z, yeah, I know Z. Nice to meet you, sort of, Z.
But he's right. I mean, apparently, cultural appropriation does
your sidekick.
You are my sidekick. Yeah,
I'm not actually. I started this channel with $1 million from my father.
No. Don't give in to the left's criticisms of anyone who makes any success of themselves. We are both dirt poor, which is why we're trying to make YouTube pay for us. But
you're not dirt poor.
Oh no, I have a job at the moment, but it's all good. No, he's right. Cultural appropriation does seem only to work one way.
Yeah,
and that's
quite right.
I'm all for cultural appropriation generally. I think cultural appropriation is a brilliant thing.
Well, it's because it's inevitable.
Well, it is inevitable, yeah. But the reason the most successful countries in the world are a product of cultural appropriation, but they are also a product of cultural assimilation. The United States is one of the most culturally appropriative countries in the history of the world, and it gained this from the United Kingdom, which is also one of the most culturally appropriative countries in the history of the world. That makes that keeps the culture renewed. It keeps it.
We're really
rich.
Tolerant about Pakistani rape gangs, for example.
That's the kind of cultural appropriation we could do without. But we also are culturally assimilative, which is probably the more important and the more accurate way of putting that. I think all cultures should be allowed to borrow from the tales and the best of the mythology of other cultures. I think it would be a fantastic thing if Bollywood, the Indian version of Hollywood, would take classic Western stories, and I think they have, and depict them in the Bollywood style, because that enriches Indian culture and it brings a brand new, totally refreshed telling to an old Western tale. And I'm all in favour of that. But it must work both ways. You can't celebrate Bollywood doing it and then criticise Hollywood for doing it. Hollywood should be doing more of this. It would create many more interesting films if it actually took the myths of indigenous peoples more seriously than it does. But we don't have this parity at the moment. And now it's just a case of, if the West does it, it is bad, ipso facto. And if anybody else does it, it should be celebrated. And as far as is possible, they should be allowed to do it in the West, which is, again, it's a problem. But you have the thing here, dwarves with Jews. This is a criticism. There is no, from what I've read of Tolkien, I've read a lot of Tolkien, his letters and everything else, I don't believe, maybe I'm wrong, if I'm wrong, correct me, I don't think Tolkien ever said, I wrote the dwarves to culturally uplift the depiction of Jewish people.
He scarcely mentions Jews, as far as I'm aware. No. I've read most of Tolkien as well.
The people who are reading this into it, this is the same, as you said, with J.K. Rowling and the goblins. The people who look at the goblins in Harry Potter and say, that looks like a Jew, they're the people who are anti-Semitic. They're the people who say, the goblin has a hook nose.
Here's a hook nose,
and he likes
battered, money-grubbing bastard.
He has a hook nose, he likes money, it must be a Jew. Yeah. They did it with Star Wars Episode 1. People said Watto was a Jew. Like, what? Okay, he has a New York accent, I guess. But
Robert Toth says, I think the biggest problem of the West is the self-loathing by white liberals. There's no longer any sense of patriotism or pride or of our Western... I completely agree. There's nothing to disagree in that.
But that's the problem.
They're not liberals, though, I would say that.
No, Robert. They're not liberals. No, we're on this channel.
They're people who... I mean, we're called the Little Platoon, okay, our channel. That's a saying from Edmund Burke, who is commonly held up as the poster boy of modern conservatism, but at the time he was member of the Whig Party, in other words, the Liberal Party. He was liberal. Proper liberals, in favour of small government and free speech, which is broadly what we're in
That's our
favour of.
position. Yeah.
That's our position. Yeah, the people doing this kind of stuff, committing these kind of travesties, are not liberals. They are actually illiberal.
Yeah, I mean,
Any decent culture will culturally appropriate. Yeah.
And Koreans and Japanese look great in suits is a really good point, because many cultures have a traditional national dress, and some people have previously asked, what is the Western national dress? Well, the point is that the Western national dress is no longer a national dress because it's an international one. The suit is a Western garb, but it's so internationalized that it has become an international garb instead. Now, you can argue that this deprives certain Western countries of a cultural heritage, but I think that's a good thing. Suits just are good. It's evidence of a culture, a world cultures which are coming together. This ought to be celebrated, and in certain contexts, like the diversification of casting choices in film, it is celebrated.
I'm not even sure I'd celebrate it. I mean, if I were meeting with a businessman, from Japan who decided to dress in traditional Japanese dress, I wouldn't care in the slightest. I actually think it was quite fascinating. The point is, it's a fact that the suit is international now.
Yeah, massively so. But no, the point of liberals, the problem there is a corruption. Unfortunately, it's an American problem. Democrats under Teddy Roosevelt first, saw that liberal was a politically popular word, so they applied it to themselves, and it is divorced from the philosophy which underpins it, which is why now Americans use liberal in a way which is coterminous with left wing. And it creates huge numbers of problems when it comes to understanding politics, because the Republican Party, which is devoted to small government and free trade and often free movement as well, but with freedom of association, it split from the Whigs in the 1910s, I think it was, because it didn't think the Whigs were sufficiently liberal. The Republican Party emerges as the liberal party in the United States. But because the Democrats co-opted the term liberal, we now call Republicans conservative, even though the ideals usually espoused by Republicans are liberal. It just doesn't make it. We ought really to get back to a proper definition of terms, which is why on this channel we will always try and say, whenever the word liberal is used to mean left-wing, we will say left-wing instead, because that's usually what's meant. And we ought really, I think, to get back to describing political affiliations and ideologies and philosophies by the correct labels, because it's not liberal to impose huge restrictions on people's lives. It's not liberal to have massive government. It's not liberal to have regulations for every single thing under the sun. No, that's left-wing to do. Americans have taken to calling that liberal, owning the libs. I think that's a mistake. So on this channel, I get your point and you're right, but we on this channel, we will insist on using that word in its traditional classical meaning.
Me with a conservative inflection.
Well, yeah, you're a conservative and I'm a liberal, but
no, I'm a liberal. I'm a conservative liberal.
Yeah. Anyway, I mean, it goes on again, asking fans to change. The fans' identity being tied up in the make-believe, criticism of other people, as we covered. For example, again, dwarves. If you're saying that dwarves are Jews, you're the anti-Semite. It's not Tolkien. He didn't say that they were Jews, I don't think. If he did, we can have a different discussion. I'm not aware that he ever did that. So, anyway, some people regard pointing this out as a personal attack and attempt to stop them from enjoying something they love. As with fandom, ignoring the negatives of something doesn't stop them from being present. Don't think that makes sense. But I did a video on this in the context of The Last Jedi quite recently. The reason people take offense at the destruction of Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi is because there is not a clear and hard divide between fictional characters and your own personality. Much of our personalities is created and crafted by fictional characters with whom we identify, and we imbue fictional characters with important parts of our personality. We imbue whole worlds with our value sets. We like entire worlds because of the value sets that we hold. When those value sets are attacked in that world, it is by implication an attack on the value set and the belief system that you hold, and when it's a character that's being attacked, it is also an attack on a part of your personality. That's the reason people object to this kind of thing. People who looked at Luke Skywalker and said, and they saw in Luke Skywalker the embodiment of all of their ideals, see their ideals being destroyed. They are their ideals. So it is kind of an attack on the person. That's why people react against this so strongly. And it's not because of mere presence of diversity. I think in the Star Wars sequels, Daisy Ridley has a certain charm to her. You could have done interesting things with her. She would have made a good Rey, but Rey, being the character that she was awfully written. That was the problem. The problem, again, was not diversity. I think Daisy Ridley's lovely. The problem was the way in which the character was written. So the attack on the world, the attack on the character, is an attack on yourself. It's not racist to point out that diversity exists as a political tool if you also say that diversity can be used as a non-political tool positively, which is our contention here. but I mean, it goes on. The sense of fan ownership and attachment isn't a new phenomenon. It goes back to 1893. The Strand magazine cancelled their subscription on the death of Sherlock Holmes. Yeah, because people care about fiction. Sherlock Holmes' death was debated in the Houses of Parliament.
Yeah,
and Arthur Conan Doyle was compelled to bring him back.
Yeah, no, he was massively unpopular.
But
do excuse me.
You're off.
Co-host and chat.
Oh, carry on.
I need a whiz. I'll be back momentarily.
Yeah, I'm going after you. But it says here, the Lord of the Rings has already been co-opted by the far right. Despite Tolkien being on the record as hating apartheid, we've mentioned this quote before, British and American imperialism in the Far East, he opposed that, raging against the Nazis and their interpretation of his work as an Aryan allegory. He was asked by German publishers to translate The Hobbit. He was told it was conditional and proving he had Aryan blood. His reply was withering, correctly so. This had continued to be the case. In 1970s Italy, there were Hobbit summer camps run by a burgeoning right-wing movement who marketed themselves as not your father's fascists. A sense of traditionalism, of restoring the apparently glorious past, drove them and connected them to Tolkien's work. And unfortunately for Tolkien, there were parallels to be made. Fans of Tolkien include Gianluca Casseri, and Anders Breivik as well, both racially motivated murderers. Varg Vikernes, black metal musician, murderer, anti-Semite, and scientific racist, i.e. someone who misapplies science to support their racism. This is such nonsense. It's remarkable to me that which was the book? There was a book that was banned. It was because it was attributed the man who murdered John Lennon. He testified in court that he was inspired by. I wish I could remember the name of the book, and my partner might remember it when he comes back. And the right wing looked upon this, as they quite often do. The right has this problem, genuinely. The right looked upon this as saying, therefore, because the book has inspired one murderer, the book must inspire murderers, and therefore it should be banned. One of the great ironies that we have these days is that it's not the left toot court, because there are good parts of the left which still exist, which don't go in for this nonsense. But a large part of what's the most public face of the modern left takes exactly the same attitude toward literature and film and fiction as the old far right used to do, or the old conservative right used to do. It thinks that, okay, sure, The Hobbit was inspired Anders Breivik, therefore The Hobbit must inspire race murderers. This is complete bullshit. It's a fallacy of composition. The fact that some nutters can find inspiration in a book does not prove that the book must, ipso facto, by its nature, inspire nutters. This is not a valid argument. If you say that Anders Breivik was inspired by The Hobbit, then you must also say that the rest of Tolkien's work must inspire other people like Anders Breivik, which maybe it does, but it's not a comment on the validity or the morality of the work. It does not damn The Lord of the Rings to say that some people can look at The Lord of the Rings and read race essentialism into it. Nutters exist in the world, nutters take inspiration from fiction just like every other person on the planet. It is a nonsense to say that because Tolkien inspired Casseri, Breivik, and Vikernes, that Tolkien therefore can be damned by association with them. Any more than the fact that the most recent mass shooting in the United States of any real significance, the congressional baseball shooting, in which members of Congress and multiple members of Congress were shot at and almost killed, was inspired by a Bernie Sanders supporter. Are you damning Bernie Sanders for inspiring mass shooters? Because that's not what the media typically does, and we wouldn't do that on this channel either. We disagree with Bernie Sanders. But just because a nutter looks at Bernie Sanders and says, inspired by his anti-capitalism, I'm going to go and murder capitalists, does not mean Bernie Sanders is not a valid voice in political discourse, which is essentially the claim that's being made here in this article. It's nonsense. Absolute bullshit. You're back. Carry on. I'm going. I'll be back momentarily.
I'm back. Where were we?
The article, we were on this paragraph here. The Lord of the Rings has been co-opted by the far right because it's inspired Nazis. It's inspired Anders Breivik. It's inspired Gianluca Casseri. It's inspired Varg Vikernes, all of whom are nasty, nasty people. So we're picking up on this paragraph. I know Z has some comments in the chat which I haven't had time to read yet. By all means, do those if you want to. I'll be back in about 3 seconds, depending on how long it takes me to piss.
Lord of the Rings connection with fascism? Are you joking me? That's just a complete bullshit. Just because Anders Breivik mentions Lord of the Rings, I don't know if he did or not. I don't tend to follow people like Anders Breivik, but that's complete nonsense. honestly. Given its previous connections with fascism, which have yet to be established as far as I'm concerned, and the response to Peter Jackson's films, it's sadly not surprising to see Lord of the Rings fandom engaging in culture war campaigns. Since at least 2014 and Gamergate, fucking Gamergate, really we're going to go there? There's been momentum that has built through different fandoms. There was overlap between Gamergate and the Sad Rabid Puppies voting campaigns at the Hugo Awards. I don't know what any of this means. Maybe I should. Though Gamergate was chaotic and unfocused in comparison, both groups were united by their hatred for the media with a progressive political message and a perceived bias towards non-white male creators. Is that established? Is that a thing? Are we going there? Gamergate? Are we still talking about that?
No, really?
There was also a sense that they were losing control of their genres, with gaming, science fiction, and fantasy being no longer seen as uniquely appealing to straight white men. You've already said, well, not you, but I think a previous article that we've covered in this segment, in this live stream, you've already said that Tolkien was appealing to, had universal appeal. You've already said that he was appealing to everyone, no matter what your cultural background. But now apparently you're claiming, the claim is that he only appeals to straight white men. If that's the case, then why are you making a series about him? You know, why are you making a series, in other words, about this man who's been lauded by fascists the world over? It makes no sense whatsoever. Herman Spearman's Hitler loved dogs. You all know what conclusions you can draw from that. Apparently he did, although he did test the poison that he gave himself before shooting himself in the brain on his dog, so he didn't love them that much.
He was also a teetotaler, which is a moral imperative for us to drink.
Yeah, and he hated smoking, which is a moral imperative for us to smoke. A true dog lover wouldn't test poison on their dogs. I speak from experience. I own 2 greyhounds, and I would sooner risk my life for them than most human beings. They're more tolerable than most human beings. So we've got some further stuff here about the Ghostbusters reboot, new continuity with female leads.
No, they're not surely defending.
Please don't. A coordinated effort to harm its marketing and internet presence by downvoting trailers and listings. That's because the fucking Ghostbusters reboot of 2016 was abysmal.
Ghostbusters 2016 is the textbook definition of a bad film.
It goes beyond that.
It was a classic example as well. The point of Ghostbusters, the original Ghostbusters, was cleverly written. It was subtle. It was very wry. Its humor was dry. It was a clever film. Ghostbusters 2016 took a bunch of failing female comedians, put them on screen because they were female, and the director, Paul Feige, was it, didn't direct. He in various different scenes in Ghostbusters 2016, he said, "Be funny," and that was it. And then you get...
Well, so he gave them free rein to improvise.
That was it. It was all improv. But it was terrible improv because they're shit comedians, which is why their careers were failing. Nothing to do with them being women. It's just that they're crap. It's the extent to which there is a coordinated effort to harm the marketing of these things is not... It's coordinated in a sense, yeah, because fans who look at a thing that they love being traduced by shills in Hollywood and reduced to inanity, which is what Ghostbusters 2016 was, well, yes, they will all go and downvote the trailer for Ghostbusters 2016 because it's garbage.
Yeah. And the point is about trailers as well, is that you can often tell if it's going to be garbage from the trailer. Driss Duba says, behind every good man there is a strong woman, Eva Brown.
This is true.
But Den of Geek, they go on
just briefly. It undermines its point again. Critics could point to dissatisfaction with reboots of popular properties, for instance 2012's Total Recall and 2014's RoboCop. So it's acknowledging that bad remakes will gain this kind of flack anyway. Then it has to justify its argument afterwards by saying, well, of course the criticism is ramped up when the leads aren't white men.
I love how they're surprised here that Bill Murray was reluctant to film a proposed sequel. Bill Murray is a famously pain in the arse actor to work with.
He's really difficult to work with.
The only person with whom he appears to have a good filmic relationship is Wes Anderson. Because he's in every single Wes Anderson movie.
It's true, and they did finally get him back as well for the first Ghostbusters sequel to actually at least acknowledge the importance of the originals,
Yeah.
which was Afterlife, which came out recently. A flawed film, not a perfect film by any means, but at least its heart was in the right place. And I don't think it's a coincidence that it's the one they got Bill Murray back for.
Yeah. They go. Let's
Star Wars trilogies.
Let's not go there. We know what this is going to be. John Boyega received racist abuse and death threats.
No. Sorry, we have to do this. The Force Awakens was criticised for Rey being a Mary Sue, which resulted. This is what
is a
says.
Mary Sue?
A Mary Sue is. It was coined in, I think, the early 2000s as a description of female fan fiction characters who were just perfect in every possible way.
Mary Sue.
This is when people write fan fiction. They insert their, usually women, it has to be said, they insert their own characters into that, and those characters are immediately loved and respected by every other established character in the IP that they're fan fictioning off of. That's what Mary Sues are. It's not just exclusively women who do this, but the tradition, it was a trend in fan fiction at that time that it was typically young women, especially teenage women, who would insert themselves into characters and marry themselves off with Harry Potter, marry themselves off with Draco Malfoy, marry themselves off with whoever the established male lead of the established franchise happened to be. So it says that campaigns were waged against Rey because she was a Mary Sue. That resulted in a response suggesting double standards for female leads and male leads. No, Rey is a Mary Sue by any stretch of the imagination. She is untrained yet overpowered. Everyone immediately loves her. The entirety of the plot hinges on her actions. She is morally perfect. Everyone adores Rey. In the film and out of the film. We're told throughout of the film. Now, it's not a double standard if you say, well, Luke Skywalker also exists. Because Luke Skywalker was not the equivalent of Rey. Luke Skywalker was an innocent farm boy, untrained, inexperienced, who made mistakes, who lost most of the battles he ever fought, until the end when his narrative arc is complete. But his story is one of complexity. His story is one of pain and trouble. And he is weaker than the villain until the end. And even at the end, he's beaten by the Emperor, and it's only his father who redeems himself by killing the Emperor and saving his son. Luke Skywalker is not a Mary Sue, so it's not double standards to say, well, you don't criticize Luke in the way you criticize Rey, because Luke is not the same kind of character as Rey is. Rey is Jesus. Luke is a normal human kid. It's so much better depicted. They say Kelly Marie Tran was abused on social media for being in a film after playing Rose. No. To the extent that she was abused as an actress for playing a role set out for her, that was bad. I don't like that. And I know that did happen. We shouldn't be mistaken as saying that because it's wrong to say the bulk of fan criticism is motivated by racism, that there wasn't any element of that in there. I'm sure that there was. It's the internet. What the fuck do you expect? But Kelly Marie Tran's character, Rose, as again we've done in our 2 videos on The Last Jedi recently, was just the definition of a diversity hire. It's astonishing nonsense. Her character has no plot, no meaning, no motivation. She's there solely to ruin the character arc of Finn, John Boyega, who is himself black. A comment under the video I did on this, which was hilarious, said, I was racist for calling Rose a diversity hire. And I said, okay, but my point was that Rose exists just to be a diverse character, and the only thing she does of any consequence is wreck the character chances of John Boyega, who is black. So it's an odd accusation to make of me.
Asians ruining the
to
chances
accuse
of
me
blacks.
of racism for saying that a black guy's character was ruined is an odd choice of argument to make.
Yeah.
Apparently John Boyega received abuse and death threats. Maybe he did. I mean, that's believable. Again, it's the internet. But I thought Finn was one of the great there were many wasted opportunities in the Star Wars sequels, and his character was one of them. I think John Boyega is a good actor, and I think he could have there was the makings of a really good character in Finn in The Force Awakens. My problem with The Last Jedi was that it destroyed his character as well. It just cheapened it and then dismissed it, and then there was nothing else to do with him. I'm all for it. The fact that he's a black guy, I think, is actually a positive thing. Fine, yeah, we've had Lando before, we've had Mace Windu before. There's only a few in Star Wars. You should have more black people in Star Wars. You should give them really good stories. You could do that with John Boyega's Finn. And they were doing that, and they ruined it. And that was my criticism of that character, which makes the racist charge for criticizing Rose a particularly odd one. Anyway, in the chat, if I can... Where's my mouse gone? There it is. I'll bring chat back up very briefly. Mary Sue's first appearance is actually in Star Trek fanfiction, as according to Herman Sperman. Actually, no, I did read this, actually. Yeah, female protagonist had sex with Captain Kirk and Spock. I haven't read this one. The person didn't. Did they have sex at the same time? Or was this separate? Was this like interracial, interspecies sex? I mean, it's very progressive, so it could well be Star Trek. But I wasn't aware. I knew that it came about in Star Trek, I think, first. I didn't know that that was the context.
Spock a top or a bottom, do you think?
I get the impression of bottom, but only when Kirk's involved. But that's more fan fiction. Driss says that Red Letter Media made the point that the reboots and remakes were big in the 80s, but they were remaking 50s and 60s B movies that could use a AAA. This is true. The Thing, the 80s version of The Thing, John Carpenter's version, remaking the 59, I think, version of The Thing. I love both of those films, but it did something new with it. And it was a brilliant, brilliant film. Same with Invasion of the Body Snatchers. The 79 version, I think, of Invasion of the Body Snatchers remade the 63 version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Both of these did brand new things. They told new stories, and they made them defining films in their own right. It wasn't just, hey, remember The Thing? Here's the thing again. It wasn't just member berries. This was a really good story idea, which we didn't have the capacity to do in this way at the time. Here is a brand new thing we can do with it, which makes it a brand new type of film. And both of those, Invasion of the Body Snatchers and The Thing, are sublime examples of the particularly 80s genre of sort of Cold War paranoia married with near-future sci-fi. They're brilliant, brilliant films. Technically, yeah, they're remakes, but they're remakes / reboots done well. And the problem is, as Driss points out, and as Red Letter Media pointed out, is that we just don't make them well anymore. Now we do it for memberberry juice. That's the reason. We don't want to do it because we have new stories to tell or we see potentials for them. It's just, that's an established IP. That will make us some money. That's why we'll do it. And it creates for a deracinated industry. It's complete bollocks, as so much of Hollywood currently is. But yeah, it goes on. The Last Jedi produced extreme fan reaction, review bombings. More coordinated efforts were made because everyone hated it, because it was an abysmal film.
It's more of the same, all of this.
Yeah, more of the same. It's to spam, and the same tactics they say are levied against the Lord of the Rings. And no, it's the same thing. Gamergate is misrepresented. Last Jedi critics are misrepresented. Critics of this series are misrepresented as well. It's not diversity that's the problem. It's not motivated by racism. It's simply to say that what we are getting now is the distinction is between fans who want stories that are faithful to source material and people who want their political messaging and narrative imposed on every aspect of media at the expense of the story and the lore and the arc and the philosophy. That's the criticism that we are making. That's the divide that exists. That's the reason people so far are hating what they've seen of Rings of Power.
Tolkien fans are harking back to a mythic version of the past because they don't like the present. Well, so what if we don't like the present?
There's lots in the present.
There's lots, exactly, yeah. The present is awful. Russia seems about to invade Ukraine, in this country at least, in the UK, with massive inflation and political chicanery. It's awful. The present is awful. But the present is always awful, I suppose, is the point.
They say right-wing Tolkien fans are harking back to the mythic version of the past because they don't like the present. It's literally a myth. That's the Lord of the Rings is a fucking myth of the past. That's the point. That's the reason. There's nothing racially exclusionary about that. Again, we've said a billion times by this point, you can do racial diversity while remaining faithful to the lore. You've got the Black Numenorians, you've got the Men of the East, you've got the Men of Harad. There are whole regions of Tolkien where you can depict these things accurately to the lore. To the extent we dislike the present, it's because we don't like the way the present is abusing the past, because there were good things in the past. Same thing with Ghostbusters, same thing with Star Wars. It's the same argument all over again.
You've got a big UPS, Ben, apparently.
Big ups, UPS. I also have a big UPS and a big penis. But that's a friend of ours, Simon. Welcome, Simon. I think. I mean, do we have anything more to cover on this, or did we want to?
I think that's about it.
Drag it to. I mean, we can go on about this. I mean, there's more. There's more and more.
We've about
Rings of Power has people to kind of get over it. It's just the same thing again and again and again, and you can tell it's been coordinated just because they're using exactly the same lines.
Yeah.
They're using exactly the same points of criticism before the film has even been produced. Before the first minute of the first episode has been laid out before us, we're getting the same talking points by the same corporate media organisations which have relationships with Amazon and are paid to review them.
You surprised me. Various journalistic outlets putting out the same message at the same time. I'm shocked.
It's a shock, isn't it? Modern journalists are shits. I am shocked. Massively shocked.
No, I have nothing else to say on the subject except that I do actually wish this series well. I hope to be pleasantly wrong.
I really want to be wrong, yeah.
Yeah.
Don Lemon could be a good actor for all we know. Who knows? He might be a better actor than he is a journalist. Well, he couldn't not be a better actor than he's a journalist, given that he's an awful journalist. But I want it to work. I want it to be good. I don't have a problem with Don Lemon being in it. I just want it to make sense, and I want it to be faithful to the lore, and I want it to tell a good story. But the fact that they've done this without the rights to the story they're telling, and the fact that they've explicitly said they want it to represent the world as it is today, for political reasons, just makes me think this is going to be absolute garbage.
I'm afraid I agree with you. It does look like it's going to be absolute garbage. You are apparently a good journo, according to Simon.
There is such a thing. Well, I studied ethics at university, and I thought ethics and journalism don't famously go together, so I'm going to become a journalist.
Yeah. Thank you, Simon, for loving the podcast. Thank you, Herman. Thank you, everyone in the chat.
Thank you all of chat.
It's been very enjoyable.
Yeah, we went on much longer than we thought we'd do. But you're the guys who make this kind of thing much more fun, much more enjoyable. Yep. We're going to do more of these in the future. Of course, we will have this abysmal creation probably to look forward to or not. I think the Rings of Power is released in November. I think. It's certainly toward the end of the year. Anyway, we have that.
In November.
No, September. It's before my birthday. Yeah, September.
Okay, yeah. 26th.
So we've got this to look forward to. We've got a number of other things coming out. We've got part 2 of Picard, which is has been long in the making. That's going to be out in the next couple of weeks. A very long, complete takedown of the Book of Boba Fett is in the works. The script's all done. It's just editing that together. That, I hope, will be out in the next few days. Star Trek Discovery has begun again. There will be a review of that once the season is ended. And of course, Marvel is kicking off again with things like the Doctor Strange is back, and we've got Captain Marvel 2 to look forward to, and we have an awful lot to cover. So we will be back. We'll be doing more of these, and you guys are the ones who make it fun. So we're looking forward to it, and we will see you again. But for now, at least, good night wherever you happen to be. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you again very soon.